Hello, and welcome to the Tech Valley Game Space Game Club podcast. I am our host for this evening, or mediator of the discussion, what have you, Kat. And tonight we will be discussing Shadow of the Colossus, a 2005 game created by Team Ico and directed by Fumito Ueda, I believe is pronunciation of the name. It was released in 2005, a PlayStation 2 exclusive, and it has been touted as one of the greatest games ever made, and practically a work of art. So I guess we're just going to go around and have everybody say their name and give a brief synopsis on what they thought of the game. Do I start?
Sure.
Alright. I'm Kat. You knew that. I enjoyed the game a lot. It had its frustrating moments, but it was definitely worth playing, and I know it's a classic, so I'm glad I finally got to play it and beat it.
Oh, okay. I'm Marcus. I played about 6 Colossus into the game, and it's pretty interesting. So it's a little bit relaxing too.
My name's Dylan. I beat it a while back. It's been a while though. I'm very much in the thought that it is a very artistic type of game, very meditative in a way. I really enjoy it. It's too bad that I'm on my Sony strike still, that I won't go back and play it. But
Long story. My name is Taro Mia. I just finished it a few hours ago. Overall, I liked it. I thought it was fascinating from a resource management perspective. And yeah, I guess I'll talk more about that.
I am Alana, and I also beat the game a while ago when I played the PS2 version. I recently started playing the HD remaster, and it's pretty much the same. Probably ran smoother, but I definitely like this game. It does seem to go on a little bit long for me though, and it's kind of tough.
My name is Anthony, and this is one of my favorite games.
My name is Jamie. It's one of 2 games that when people ask me my favorite game, I usually say Shadow of the Colossus and Super Smash Bros. Melee. Shadow of the Colossus being my favorite as far as single-player games go. And that would still probably be the case. I mean, there's lots of other games that are kind of up there with it, but it's kind of the easiest go-to answer for me. I played it when it first came out, and I played the HD remaster version around the time that came out. I love the game.
My name is Robert. I played the PlayStation 3 remake just recently, within the last week, and I completed it. I have kind of mixed feelings about the game. I felt that the fun parts were very fun, but the tedious parts were very tedious, and the difficult parts were very difficult.
All right. Well, that's everybody. So I was going to ask this as my first question. Who's played before? But everybody, like when it first came out, but I think everybody's kind of elaborated on whether they played it when it was first released or not. Mm-hmm. So, I guess my next question will be, what do you guys think of the story overall? Interesting story?
Simple.
Very minimalistic.
Mm-hmm. That was something that really struck me about it. I'd heard a lot about the game over the years, but I had no idea the story was so bare bones, actually. And a lot was left ambiguous. I actually enjoyed that more than I thought I would.
Mm-hmm. It has a very fairy tale quality to it. Definitely a cautionary tale on that one. So yeah, I kind of liked it, the fact that they kept it minimal. There was some really interesting parts towards the end. You know, the doorman, the voice that constantly encourages you to defeat all of these colossi. Starts mentioning things about cities that no longer exist and stuff like that. So there was some like lore building. It felt like that they were trying to imply towards the end of the game, but they never really go through in depth with it, which I found was kind of interesting. I'm kind of okay with the fact that it didn't go in depth, but personally speaking, I kind of would have liked it if they did too. I don't know. I'm 1.5 in mind with that.
I'm really glad that they didn't personally. I feel like the environment of the wasteland, it like tells a story or it implies a story that to me is a lot more interesting for having those gaps than it would be if, say, it was like Metroid Prime or something where I could find like logs of the people from the lost civilization and get a lot of detail on their society or whatever. I like that it's just kind of hinted at, personally.
It does feel very deliberate that they kept it so minimal in regards to the lore part of it. I agree. And it didn't annoy me as much because it felt like it was part of the design.
I'm curious, since Kat, you were mentioning, you had a question about who had played it previously. I'm curious who has played Eco before, and if anybody had any thoughts about the story in relation to that. I don't want to necessarily spoil Eco for those who haven't played it, but I guess one of the nice things that's hopefully not too spoilery to say is that there are some references within the ending and the overall story, I think, to Eco, but it's not like a one-to-one thing, I don't think, at least where you can clearly map the way that they connect. Like, one is alluding to the other in kind of interesting ways if you played both, but it kind of remains ambiguous either way, I think. But I'm curious if anybody else played Eco and had any feelings about the story in connection with that.
I'm Anthony, and I have not played Eco.
Has nobody played Eco? Just me?
I have played the demo.
I played like an hour on the PS3 remaster, and I don't know, I spent an hour wandering around.
So for those who have played the beginning, at least, and again, I'm going to spoil something that you find out in the absolute beginning of the game, which is, and even if you've seen the game, you play as, a boy with horns, who's like brought to this castle basically because he's going to be sacrificed because he has horns, which is taken as an indication that he's like cursed or has like a cursed fate, basically. So you can probably at least see, for those who played a bit of Shadow, how that connects in some ways to some of the things that happen there. But again, it's not like necessarily, I don't think, clearly indicated that that's like the same character as any character in Shadow.
I read up on that a bit, actually. There's supposed to be like, it's estimated there's like a 2,000 year gap or something, like many generations. They actually guesstimated from like a horn boy's born once every 100 years or something, and there are like 100 coffins up with horn boys in them in Eco. So like someone did some math. I don't remember the exact details, but yeah, I might have spoiled myself for Eco a little bit, but it's kind of hard to find in-depth stuff on Shadow of the Colossus that doesn't also bring up Eco, since it's very interesting in how they tie into each other, and they're made by the same studio, set in the same universe and everything.
Speaking of the story, what do you guys think about the ending? I feel like, taking today into context, the ending kind of surprised me a lot less, because back in the day when especially the Shadow of Colossus came out, a positive ending was far more common in video games. So to expect Shadow of the Colossus to be, you're already presented your main character as a heroic, brave warrior, right? But towards the end, it ends in a tragedy. Like, was that for the people who started playing the game actual surprise or anything like that? Was that like considered a particularly revolutionary thing? I'm just curious.
It wasn't for me. Like, I played it at the time that it came out, as I said, and it wasn't the like kind of big twist, if you want to call it that, was not the most appealing part of the game by any means. And I felt like what was more interesting about the story was how it kind of was locked into place from the very beginning. I guess there's cutscenes, but to me the most important part of the plot, if you want to call it that, was just the very beginning where Dorman, gives a warning to Wander saying like, you're probably going to pay a high price for doing this, like doing what I ask you, and he says it doesn't matter, and then you go do it. And that's like the core of the story to me, and so that was like Wander's defining characteristic to me, like was just basically that it was like this resolve to do this thing no matter what the cost is, and then you as the player either go do it or not, and it's very linear in that sense. There's a lot of things in the game I think that are not necessarily overtly through like character dialogue, but through every other means of communicating, the game is kind of indicating to you that this is not a great thing that you're doing. So the fact that it then doesn't turn out well, it didn't feel like that was supposed to be a big surprise to me necessarily.
It was more like a logical conclusion.
Right.
Yeah.
Because at the very least, I distinctly remember at that age thinking like all games had to be about heroics, positives, being brave and whatnot. So today obviously we have plenty of games that subvert that specific expectation. So I play Shadow of the Colossus today and I'm like, this doesn't feel any particularly different from all these other games that also subverts my expectation. But, the whole implication of what you're doing is probably not good kind of thing. I'm just curious if that was at the time, if there was a little time factor in play in my judgment of whether that was supposed to be an interesting mechanic or not, or interesting theme or not in the game.
Well, what other games were popular around 2005? Like
Grand Theft Auto.
I think my perspective on the game is that there's a certain, I don't know what you'd call it, a trope. Where the hero's trying to rescue the girl type of thing. And it's used in a lot of games to like justify all your actions and such. This one, I think, right from the beginning and all the way through, I felt like the bad guy the whole time, and I didn't think that this was a worthwhile thing that I was doing. But it's sort of in the way some other games, like maybe Braid or other games, talk about this type of typical storyline. It did feel very, like one of those classic stories, what are they called? Fables.
fairy tale?
It felt like a fable, fairy tale type thing, but it didn't try to... I mean, every time you kill one of these things, which is like trying to stop you, I felt pity for it, and then you get kind of struck down by this black stuff, so it felt like a very negative process the whole way.
Even to say that they're trying to stop you, like, feels stronger than the way a lot of them are portrayed.
Some of them attack you, like, right from the start, though, so, like, if they made them more passive, I think, I could have accentuated it, but maybe people wouldn't have fought back if the Colossuses weren't doing anything. They would have just left them alone.
It seems like, I mean, there's a fair number of them that are passive until you attack them. There are some that are aggressive from the start, but...
I think it's, like, after that initial stage where, like, the first one attacks you right away. If it kind of presents, like, in order to get to the other ones, you have to kill that one, so...
The first one doesn't attack you right away.
Well, he
comes
sees
after
you, yeah, and he gets up close.
He tries to smash you with a big club. So I think
I whistled at it, and it started hunting for blood immediately.
Yeah, I think if you didn't,
You whistle.
Maybe you interrupted his podcast.
I mean,
the very first part where you see the first Colossus is in a cutscene, and it's walking past you, not seeing you. I feel like that's very intentionally done. Mm-hmm. I'm sure. I got its attention too. I probably did it. Obviously, there's different ways you can get its attention. That might make it seem more or less aggressive. So I suppose it's open to interpretation. I'm pretty sure I probably shot an arrow at it or something.
If you just stand there, I think it comes after you and tries to smash you.
Yes, it does.
But I mean, after you've already killed the first one, it's kind of like a moot point at that point. You're already doing the missions, so there's never any well, maybe I'll let this one live type of thing.
Yeah, you don't have the choice. You don't have a choice, and there's not much to do besides killing Colossi.
The only way to win is not to play.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, the only way to be a good guy is to not kill the Colossi. So
you can just ride your horse around the countryside.
Yeah,
You can.
That's what I did.
enjoy
Horse
the
simulator.
I don't know. It definitely runs counter to the way that I felt playing it, and that I definitely feel like there were a substantial number of the Colossi that were minding their own business before I came along, if not all of them. There are some that break out of a wall like the Kool-Aid Man, very threatening. But most of them are just doing what they do, and then you come along like a jerk. And
I had a completely different experience. I can only count 3 where I distinctly felt like I was the bad guy. Everything else, I'm like, good. Stay dead.
Why?
Because they immediately attacked me the moment I whistled at them.
Stop catcalling monsters.
It's a fine-looking stone butt you got.
You walk into somebody's house and whistle at them. What are you so upset about?
Which ones did you feel bad for? Do you remember specifically?
The water one, the eagle one, and the sand snake thing.
Okay,
Those were the 3.
Yeah, the water one with the electric spikes on its back, that's Hydrus. And Phalanx is the desert one that flies, and then Avion is the eagle. I looked up the names. They're actually pretty cool.
Right.
Yeah, no, those are definitely some of the actually... Avion and Phalanx are kind of fan favorites because Phalanx is super, super passive. It will never attack you no matter what you do. And people like it for that reason. And then Avion is cool because, it doesn't bother you until you bother it.
Right.
So that makes sense that you would feel the worst for those two.
Mm-hmm. Felt bad for the last guy. He just stuck there
Yeah.
in the tower. No wonder he's grumpy and shooting.
Yeah. Well, the interesting about the last one is people theorize that every time you kill a Colossus, a jet of light appears where its body is, so you can find your way back to it, but the last boss, Malice, is so tall that he can actually see everything in the Forbidden Land, so some people are like, he was probably watching all the columns of light go up and realizing that you were killing all the other Colossi, so kind of why he, shot first and asked absolutely no questions as soon as he saw you.
Did anybody go back to locations of a Colossus they had previously slain?
I was hunting lizards, and I had to ride my horse through the desert, and I rode right past one of the dead bodies just lying there.
Yeah, I don't remember if I went back when I played it, but I was reading that they're still kind of there in a way, or there's
Yeah, supposedly they just fall. They're not necessarily exactly where you killed them. The game will just put them where it thinks it should be, but they'll put a dead body there for you to see whenever you pass them.
Yeah. Actually, you can enter something called, I think, Reminiscence mode. I'm not sure if it's, if you go up to the statue and, how you normally pray at Dorman's shrines and stuff, it's similar to that. It's a similar function. You can go up to the Colossi, and I'm not sure if it's either you watch a video like a playback of when you killed it, or you fight it again, like in kind of a sepia flashback kind of filter. But
Yeah, I think you can possibly fight them again.
I think that's how you do the time trial.
yeah, time trial. I think you go up to the idols actually.
Oh, I thought that's what you were talking about.
No. You can go up to their dead bodies in the land itself and just be like, "Hey, friend, remember that time I killed you?"
What do you mean by the bodies are sort of there? Or are they not fully there?
I haven't actually gone to see it. I just read this, so that's why I was curious if anybody else had done it. I guess I read that there was like a mound of like earth and stone, like not necessarily their exact body, but like kind of something indicating.
I assume that the credits
them.
was pretty much exactly that, right?
Yeah, probably.
I noticed the body of the second guy. I was trying to find another Colossi, and I, was wandering around. And of course, I went in the completely wrong direction. I ended up where the second boss is, and, there's nothing there except for the second boss, which I'd killed. And I just noticed it was a big heap of stone. I was like, oh, gee, I feel great. Like, riding by on the bridge a couple times, I thought I'd glimpsed it down in the mist, but I was like, nah, it's just some rocks or something. But I got up close, and I was like, oh yeah, it really is him. I didn't stop to dwell on it, though. I was trying to, I was like, all right, not the one I want to kill. You're already dead. So, yeah, I wanted to beat the game, and I didn't have time to get off my horse and jump around on his sad, forlorn, rocky body or anything, so...
I had a problem of finding Colossi areas too early, and they, obviously, since I'm on the wrong Colossi, the character just basically wouldn't register. So I'm like, all right, I'm supposed to not be here. Was like often my reaction.
Yeah, they didn't seem to appear until you needed to fight them.
Right.
I pretty much explored the entire world somewhere maybe between Colossi 4 and 5. I said, I'm filling in my map. I'm going to all the save spots. I'm getting all the fruit, doing everything, and then I resumed the game afterwards. But none of the Colossi appeared until you got to them in a row.
Right.
Yeah. Well, they can't. They actually do. You have to kill them, and they only appear in the order that Dorman assigns them to you, which I think is kind of a bummer, but makes some sense. I mean, for one, I think the original PS2 game wouldn't be able to handle 16 colossi on one map moving around and causing all sorts of crazy physics stuff with their crazy physics bodies, and probably die if there were 4 walking around at the same time, so let alone 16.
I don't know if there's a reason they couldn't let you do them in any order.
I would have preferred that, I think, actually. Kind of pick and choose.
It seems to me, obviously just speculating, that the main reason is like difficulty curve related, which is interesting because I definitely had some Colossus battles that were like a spike in difficulty, and then ones after it that were much easier, partly just because it is partly a puzzle game, and those can inherently be difficult to balance for every player. But I feel like they did try to have a fairly gentle difficulty curve, so maybe that's why they didn't want you going and fighting like, I don't know, some of the later ones that were maybe a little more involved or more difficult. First thing.
Actually, I just realized this. They leave the story very ambiguous. They don't give you a lot of definite details. And they, in fact, the director and team, Eco, encourage people to kind of, create their own story around the game. But I just realized, by keeping the order of the Colossi static and, that's one of the few things they actually control. Like, I just realized that's definitely something that... Maybe that's something that needed to be done because they leave everything else so open-ended, They wanted to at least be able to control the way in which you meet and fight these beings because, they don't fill in the gaps for much anything else.
Am I correct in thinking that you get a little bit extra, grip after each battle, things like that?
Yeah.
It sounds to me like you get a little extra grip and a little extra health. Am I incorrect in the health part?
No, you are correct.
Yeah, because I definitely felt like if you're not looking for any of the newts or the fruits, it scaled your character anyways, which actually makes narrative amount of sense too when you think about it.
Yeah, you're absorbing pieces of a god. I think you would get a little stronger. A little more nasty looking, but stronger. Speaking of that god itself, what was your guys' take on Dorman? Good, bad, neutral?
Oh, I think it felt pretty neutral. Because totally from the beginning, like, this is not gonna, you're gonna pay a very high price for this. And it's like, alright, hey, go kill this next one. And every time, it's like, oh yeah, who transports you in between the battles? Because I thought that was like really weird. It's like, oh, hey, I woke up in the middle of the temple after being assaulted by all these tentacles.
It is implied after defeating the last one that something carries you back, but they never reveal who.
Dorman, arguably.
I'm thinking it's Dorman. It's heavily implied.
Pretty
that.
sure.
Be given the magical way you just start floating.
Yeah.
I didn't have a lot of strong feelings on Dorman as a character necessarily. I love the voice. But one thing I was watching a few different people here at the Game Space play, and one of the things I remember really disliking about the game that I heard some people complaining about as they were playing through as well is the way Dorman gives you hints. Basically just at like timed intervals, it seems to me, when you're fighting.
Yeah.
And oftentimes for me, the main thing I didn't like about it was when I originally played the game was that it was things that I'd already figured out. It's just I hadn't been able to execute on them yet. Like there's a certain amount of just skill with being able to like do the thing once you figure out what needs to happen. So I'd be getting these hints and it feels kind of patronizing at that point. Like if it wasn't already, it's like, I know, Dorman, get off my case. But it was interesting to me this time. I was just thinking about it more because I was just watching people play. I was like, it's kind of an odd thing that they've made this hint system be, in-world presented through Dorman. I mean, it makes sense with Dorman as like this disembodied voice, but it's kind of weird from a narrative perspective in that Dorman presumably wants you to complete your task, but he, she, whatever, like the entity of Dorman is giving you these like cryptic hints on what to do rather than just telling you. It's like, if Dorman wants you to hurry up, maybe just like tell you exactly what to do rather than just allude to it.
It would be hilarious if like you spend 2 hours on the same boss or like 5 hours or something in game, he just finally snaps. It's like an Easter egg. He's like, oh my god, just go up and behind it and here, stab it. Jeez.
At the very least, it wouldn't be like the Colonel from Metal Gear Solid, because that was the most annoying character throughout that game series.
Never played.
Oh gosh. No fan of him.
Does this game remind you of any anime?
It reminded me a lot of No More Heroes.
No More Heroes?
Yep, No More Heroes.
The first one or the second one?
The first one. The gameplay structure is incredibly similar.
Oh, I mean, it's like boss.
Not only is like No More Heroes such a boss-focused game, but also like the completely dead, empty world that you play in Shadow of Colossus is awfully similar to No More Heroes as well.
I felt like No More Heroes, at least. Let me see. The first one, you didn't really have you had like a very minimal overworld, and you had like mini games and stuff. Like I was looking at the other games, like notable games that came out that same year, and it's like I see why Shadow of Colossus could stand out because there wasn't really that. One of the nice things about the game is that there's just enough going on, and the music is just set up enough that when you're just riding the horse, you can just kind of press X and just sit back and just let the horse auto ride, and you're like, oh, this is kind of nice. Like you just the game's just doing its thing, and then I even noticed that the horse will kind of like autocorrect and go through paths and stuff by itself. So it's like all the other games that came out, like Psychonauts, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, Doom 3, Resident Evil 4, God of War, Burnout, Pokemon Emerald, Guitar Hero. Like they have like so many things going on. While this game was like, nope, just kind of sit back and it's like you're in between boss, just kind of enjoy it. It's like, oh hey, there's a temple, and then that's it. You see for the next 5 minutes, just riding the horse.
I guess for me, the overworld reminds me so much of No More Heroes because in both games, like I said, there's almost nothing going on. But I had this sort of, it's kind of like, I relate it similar to grinding in RPGs, which to me I actually like. There's a certain rhythm to it that, you just kind of do your thing and just enjoy the ride kind of thing. So for the Shadow of the Colossus, I would just ride in some random direction, hit upon a tree, and go like, okay, there's gotta be fruits on these trees, and start farming for fruits. Or like I find a shrine and I'm like, okay, there's gotta be a newt somewhere in here, and I just kind of farm for newts.
Yeah.
And No More Heroes, like I have exactly the same impulse. The moment I see a garbage can, I'm like, all right, I'm slapping that garbage can and grabbing that T-shirt out of it. To me, the gameplay between those two was so eerily similar that I'm like, I'm kind of liking this for the same reason I actually liked Overworld and No More Heroes, despite the fact that it was supposed to be a satirical implementation of Grand Theft Auto, where it's like, there's nothing to do in the world. Why are you making it feel like there's so much things to do, kind of thing.
This game reminds me of Princess Mononoke.
Ooh, good comparison.
I wonder who brought that to your attention.
I didn't think of it until I saw it on the phone.
One of my favorite Colossus battles is the I can't remember the name, but the sand snake thing in the cave.
Oh, Dirge.
Yeah, where you have to while you're on aggro, turn around and shoot it in the eye. That part reminded me a lot of the beginning of Mononoke.
And that's one of my favorite movies.
I love that movie, actually. I saw it for the first time, I think last year. I'm sad I missed out on it for so long, but it's so cool.
I got to see it in the theater.
Really?
At the Spectrum, yeah.
Dude, nice.
That movie scarred my 10-year-old self.
I could see, yeah. It would have scarred my 10-year-old self, too. There's a lot that can be scarring. Shooting off a deer god's head and death touch black stuff.
It was mostly decapitation that I was not a fan of.
You mean there's a part where there's a townsman and they're about to assault some woman or something like that, and the lead hero, being the hero, rips off their arms. Yeah, he shoots an arrow and that guy's hands come off or something.
Yeah, he shoots the arrow into the sword and the arms stay on the sword. Get stuck into a tree or something.
That was scarring.
That was awesome.
Pretty brutal.
Let's not spoil that one to you.
So, remember, people, if you're about to watch Princess Mononoke, watch it after you're 18.
Also, Attack on Titan.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, a lot of limbs flying around in both of those.
Yeah.
What do you think about the camera? It seemed at first the camera kind of annoyed me, but then I got used to it. I was like, oh, this is actually kind of cool.
Yeah, it's fine.
Hate the camera.
Oh, the horse camera was really weird. I was like, no, it's not a movie. I want the horse to be in the middle.
I'm in the hate camp myself. Although, to clarify, to compare it with Journey, I think Journey's camera was infinitely worse.
Really? I thought
Yes.
it was much more tolerable.
No, I thought the motion controls, again, with Journey was the tipping point for me. It's like, this is the worst camera I've ever dealt with since Sonic Adventures.
Yeah.
Sonic Adventures, by and far, to me, gets the prize for the worst camera invented by humankind.
Like one of the first 3D games.
But Journey was up there. The one thing I didn't like about it, and I bet you it's the same thing for you, Kat, is that the camera will constantly autocorrect regardless of whether you tell it to, aim it at a specific angle or not. And this was further compounded by the fact that if you're tipping the analog stick, there doesn't seem to be a mid-state analog. It was just either on or off. So that made it even harder to adjust the camera.
Yeah.
I think for me, I found it a lot more tolerable than Journey because it has a pseudo lock-on system where it allows you to focus only on the Colossi or only on aggro. And that made a lot of scenarios a lot more tolerable. And some of them, it was absolutely vital that you do that. So I understood what they were trying to go for, but I was not a fan of the fact that the camera was constantly moving when I wanted it to be still.
Yeah. No, there'd be honestly, I like the camera in Journey more because it was more forceful. And it just felt appropriate at the times when it would like pan out and show those big views. I kind of knew to lay off then and just sort of let it do its thing. Here in this game, I mean, you're actually doing some serious fighting. You have to be able to look around and assess the terrain and look at the Colossus. Like, is that a weak spot? Is that a weak spot? Can I climb up there? Is that grass there on its arm? I don't know. I would know if the camera didn't keep going to the left. I don't want to keep looking at its face or its kneecap. Stop. I just found it very frustrating because I'm a pretty cautious player and like I like to be able to scope things out really well before I, go for anything. I mean, and if I can't scope things out properly, I end up getting flustered and falling and making bad decisions and yeah, hence why a 16-hour playtime for this game for me. So, but no, the camera was honestly a worse enemy than the Colossi. I maintain that. I will maintain that until forever, I think. But there was some satisfaction in kind of beating it too, and overcoming despite the camera. So, I guess that's a plus.
I remember having a lot of trouble with the camera when I played it, but I can definitely understand the criticism of it kind of teases you in that like it seems like you can manipulate it, and then as soon as you stop manipulating, it's back to like art-directed perspective again. Like it just goes immediately back to that. But yeah, I mean, between the lock-on, as you mentioned, Taro, which I really appreciated, and also the aiming mode with the bow. I think those were the two things I used, like when I wanted more control over things. Like even if I wasn't going to necessarily shoot an arrow for any reason, as long as I'm on stable enough ground that I can get into aiming mode with the arrow, like then you pretty much have control over the camera. So I would use that to assess at times.
You probably use the sword, the light, beam of light too.
Yeah. Of course, once you're on the Colossus, it's another story.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just didn't like doing those things though because like your character's left standing and vulnerable. Like I prefer to be, moving around and being able to control the camera as I wish, but
I think the one other aspect I'm going to bring back Journey again. Like I felt like Journey did not have a very good excuse for having the camera that it did. Whereas, Shadow of the Colossus did. In that game, like I cannot imagine how difficult it is to implement the camera in that game because there's so many different variables, there's so many different locations you can be on the Colossi, and it's like, so what should the camera focus on when you're at this specific stage, or what should the camera focus on when you're at this specific stage? Well, if the Colossi was playing this specific animation, so forth. So, like, that game had a lot of complexity coming from, 3D camera perspective that I can easily argue for the game to say like, okay, I can understand why the camera is awful, but like I have less excuses for Journey. It's like I want to be able to see this. Why are you not letting me? I think that's BS.
Again, Journey's supposed to be a guided experience, but
yeah, that's why I'm saying Journey doesn't have the excuse, because if Journey is supposed to be more of a linear game and the Colossus is like moving in all these different directions, like Journey should have a better camera. I personally didn't have a problem with Journey's camera, but I wasn't trying to push the boundaries of the levels either.
I don't remember having any problems with Journey's camera. I mean, I noticed a couple times when it went into fixed mode, like when you're riding across, when you see the background in the background. Yeah. It's like that had a purpose for it. It was to put you in a mood. But when you were actually just running around, I mean, the camera was pretty much yours to control.
I had a different problem with the camera in Shadow of the Colossus. I'm not sure if it was just me or like sometimes I felt like the direction you move was a product of the camera angle to some extent. Which was a problem when I was trying to move in very precise ways and the camera would start panning around.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I'm trying to move this way, and I'm like rotating the move stick around to try to keep moving. And it was especially a problem when I would the majority of the Colossus, I feel like, when you're grabbing onto them, when you're grabbing onto the hairs to try to hold onto them and move around, you can do some free running and jumping, but usually you're climbing around using your grip. So the majority of the time I'm holding up, I'm trying to move up to the weak spots, usually. And the problem with the camera was, even though I think I'm like pressing perfectly up on the controller, it feels like I start moving left or right and it doesn't want to go up, which is a problem when you have a limited grip gauge. And the other problem was what I was saying in my intro about this game being pretty difficult. Like some of the timings where you only have a few seconds potentially of opening to do something before you start getting swung around or something. The fact that the timing, I felt like some of the timings for those events in this game made it much more difficult than it needed to be, because I was fighting the camera and sometimes it was hard to get that precise enough control to do what I wanted to do, and with that limited time frame, because the Colossus had certain animations that would allow you to kind of move to the next section of them, but it was like sometimes a very narrow window. If you missed it because of the camera or something, then that got me frustrated. But that was my big thing with the camera. I was just trying to control during my ascent, usually.
Yeah, actually, you hit the nail on the head for why I hate it. Put in better words.
I guess it adds a little bit to the enjoyment, because then when you finally kill a Colossus, you're like, yes, I won.
Yeah.
Even though that camera, as soon as it starts shaking around, the camera turns like 360, and you're like, I can't figure out which way to move. Please don't fall.
One thing I did discover, and I'm going to bring back No More Heroes again, this also reminded me a lot of No More Heroes, was that being on part of different body parts of the Colossi triggers different animations. And I think in the speedrunning community, they call this the AI manipulation technique. And when I discovered that, I came to realize that the game was mostly about positioning yourselves to have like an optimal way to get to not only be able to traverse all the way to the weak spot as soon as possible and stab it as much as possible, but then to escape very quickly back to a safe spot and just kind of lie there for a while as a Colossi plays a completely different animation, and then repeat the cycle over again. So because I already knew long before playing this game how to defeat most of the Colossi, I could one-cycle them very frequently because I was manipulating their AI, in other words. And to me, like, that was a fascinating design decision that I think the team Ico made. And it makes a lot, when you think of it from that perspective, it makes a lot of sense why, your grab meter is a meter instead of always constant. And your attack gauge is not immediate, but something that you actually have to charge. Because if you play the game in an AI manipulation way, it's a lot more engaging.
One of the things that still really impresses me about the game is the feeling of like the physics and momentum of climbing a Colossus. And so, Tara, I was mentioning this to you as I was watching you play, that like just from watching other people play it here, I saw that there were a few of the Colossi that I defeated clearly in not the way that was like the optimal way that was designed. For example, the next to last one, Argus, I think, has like a sword, and then you knock the sword out of its hand so that you can access the weak point on its hand, and then you can get it to like kind of chop the ground so its hand is on the ground. I never did that. I somehow like jumped to the hand and landed on it, like while it was just hanging at the side. And so that's one of the things I like about the game, and I feel like, whether or not it was intentional, the Taro, you had a really cool moment as well.
Yeah,
where
with the
he just,
second
like,
boss.
Yeah, he managed to get it to like fling you like, right into the correct location. It's sort of like, and it still feels like you're in control to the degree that you should be, and that like just with the grip, like the design decision of the one button being grip, like, and you decide when you want to grab on and release, is like even when you're being thrown all over the place, like it was a matter of you releasing the grip at the right time where it then like threw you up into the air where you could land in a good location. And that's something that's still incredibly fun to me. And I feel like other games that have tried to replicate the feeling of Shadow of the Colossus, with like a boss character that's quite large that you climb on, like I never quite get that same sensation from it that I get here. And it still is like, as far as a technical and design accomplishment, like I can't think of another game that's matched that feeling of like the kind of David and Goliath thing they were going for, or like you being a little flea.
It's also... Darn it, I lost my train of thought. All right, moving on. I mean, let me try this again. Given the whole motion thing, I'm also in a complete agreement that I like the fact that the grab is a completely different button. I feel like Shadow of the Colossus is one of those games that does a great job of really paring down what you can do in the game, but making the most out of it. Like there's I don't know if you guys watch Extra Credits if you're listening to this podcast, but there was a quick episode talking about what game developers should aim for when it comes to depth and complexity. And their simple statement was, make the game as least complex as possible, but give it the most amount of depth. And particularly in this game, like the grip is such an excellent example of, it's hold the R1 button, and either you grab onto the Colossi or you don't, if you let it go kind of thing. But from that, you can discern a lot of other implications, such as, can I use the momentum of the animation to launch yourself upwards? Because for almost every other game where grabbing a ledge is an automatic thing that you do, like I can't imagine that control scheme working for this one and being able to do all the tricks that you can. So they were able to like create a lot of complexity out of that single design decision that I found was really fascinating. Same goes for the grand majority of, in fact, the weapons. Like, the sword can be used for all sorts of other things besides just stabbing things. You can use it to get their attention by trying to blind them, You can use it to make sound, which was actually critical for one of the bosses. Like, they were able to pull out a lot from that, that single item alone, which I was really surprised with. Yeah. And was really impressed.
Yeah, so many of the design decisions, like the verbs that you have and the behaviors that are built in, have not just a variety of different like gameplay contexts where they're used, but also they have like, I guess, a narrative context or ways that they reinforce the story. Again, like in a way, I really like when story is told not necessarily through like a lot of exposition and dialogue. So, for example, like the case of grabbing on towards the end when you're getting pulled into the pool, and the last kind of bit before the pool is the stairs, and you can like grab onto the stairs and the pool is like pulling you towards it. Like I really like when it's like the same kind of gameplay verb that you've been doing throughout the game is like recontextualized, and like it's just reinforcing like the mindset that you're in and that the character's in, and kind of like making those align with each other. Same with the horse. Like, I hope we talk about aggro at some point, because that's like one of my absolute favorite aspects of the game. And like, a lot of people have mixed feelings about aggro's behavior, but I love that aggro has like, AI associated with it, Marcus, as you were mentioning. And, I feel like that has gameplay implications, and that there are some of the fights that just wouldn't work unless aggro could navigate and pathfind on its own. Like, you can't have the boss fight against that sand snake in the cave where you like turn around and you're just controlling your aiming of your bow and arrow separately from, you're not controlling aggro at that point. Aggro is moving on its own, and that wouldn't work if it was just like you had to control everything yourself and it was like tank controls. But at the same time, like aggro having unique AI and like a personality kind of like has narrative, ramifications and just like mood ramifications, and that like it's the only other thing that feels alive apart from the occasional newt and the colossi, right? It's like those are the only living things really that you encounter in this vast wasteland. So like it's natural that you form some kind of strong relationship with Argo, whether that's a love-hate relationship or not. In the same way that it's natural that like you kind of feel sad when the colossi die, and that like you form a weird bond with them as well. So yeah, there's all these different things that are both like, I feel like it's a game that I keep coming back to as a really great example of how every decision works on like multiple levels, like not just gameplay, but the sense of loneliness and everything else that the game's trying to convey.
Yeah, aggro frustrated me a lot at first because I really wanted to like micromanage what direction I was going in and stuff, so I found him absolutely intolerable for a bit first. But right around that time with the with Dirge, the sand snake guy that chases you around that big cavern, I kind of realized aggro knows what it's doing, and I actually never figured out you have to shoot that one in the eyeballs. I just ran around until it flipped itself over for some reason. Don't ask me how. I think it crashed into the wall somehow, but it didn't always flip over when it crashed into walls. I don't know what I did, but got through it, thank God. I liked aggro though. Once you surrender control and kind of let it do its own thing, you're better off. And also, I do appreciate the fact that he doesn't always listen to you and tries to do his own thing. Like, that's very much like real horses. I took a horseback riding course in college for a wellness class, and horses don't always listen to you. They like to, bend down and eat grass when you stop, or sometimes they get bored and they want to run, which is terrifying. I actually kind of like that about aggro. I think it's very true to life that he has a mind of his own.
I found aggro very aggravating.
True to its name.
Yes, not so much because of the control of him. I mean, once I learned that he would navigate himself if I just not touch the stick and just hold the button down, he generally would cross anything without stopping very much. Mostly it was just getting on to him. That was the problem. I mean, it's...
Oh, yeah. Let me know about this.
That's why I was watching Taro play. I had to tell him some aggro tricks. It was frustrating to watch. Yeah, because if you just walk up and press triangle, it feels like it works maybe 1 out of 3 times. I find that frustrating. But you can actually jump towards aggro and just hold the grip button and you'll hop like right in the saddle. Which I find useful like at times when I would call aggro. Like I'd be in danger to call aggro. And aggro kind of runs a little bit by you. Usually, like when you call it, so you can actually just like hop right onto it and do like a running catch, which feels awesome when you execute it properly.
Now you have to play the game again, Robert.
I still have to play it like 4 more times to max out my stamina.
Has anyone jumped off while it was going really fast?
All the time.
Yeah, all the time.
First time I did it was an accident. I thought I was hitting the go faster button. I got my buttons confused a lot in this game.
Yeah.
Has anyone tried to kill the horse?
Yep, multiple times.
No.
Well, I think it's funny how even though you're worried about the horse is basically invincible, and I was, if you try to hit it, it's like hitting stone, and eventually it gets annoyed with you and starts walking away. But it's kind of weird how, well, both the girl who's dead and the horse are like indestructible. Which I thought was interesting.
I had a giant flying sand snake take him for a ride and fling him through the sky, and he still survived.
Tara had an awesome moment where fighting phalanx, where he managed to ride aggro up onto the wing. It was glorious.
Oh man, can we talk about different random hijinks that we were able to pull off? Because that was entertaining.
Absolutely not.
Let me start.
Hijinks allowed.
So the water snake. One thing I discovered was, at the end of every Colossi, you get those little weird black tentacles sucked into you and you collapse onto the ground. But what's really interesting is that you have separate animations for when you're on ground versus when you're in the water. If you're in the water, you just kind of you get caught and you just kind of wiggle around in the water like you would, and then you'll just kind of lie there floating like a dead crab. But here's the important part. You can goof that system and make it think you're on the ground by jumping at exactly the right time when the tentacles start sucking into you. And I did this completely by accident. I just jumped, and then I started sinking through the bottom all the way to the bottom of the lake, and then it will play the ground animation, and I'm like, that happened. But what's really entertaining is the tentacle animation about it going into your character actually is made to loop until you hit the ground. So you just kind of keep watching this happening as he slowly sinks down to the bottom of the lake. And it's that looks like it hurts, it's really uncomfortable, and it does not look like I would survive very long.
I really like the phrase "goof that system." I feel like that should be your middle name. God, goof that. Did anybody? There's some cool built-in details around how you can use some of the moves. There's some other little fancy tricks you can do with aggro, which I thought were fun. Obviously you can stand on aggro, which is super fun. But did anybody ride on the side of the saddle to discover that one? That took me a long time to discover. I think it might be useful maybe in some very rare cases, because aggro's indestructible. You'd probably use aggro as a bit of a shield from the few colossi that actually shoot projectiles at you. But that's a fun one. Did anybody manage to grab onto any of the birds while they were in midair? You can grip the doves and stuff.
The doves?
Yeah, you're too heavy for them to carry you, so they just kind of slowly float down. But because they're often kind of there in the temple area at the beginning, and there's that balcony that you can jump off of, that's a really good place to try it. Because if you just run towards them and they scatter and then jump, a lot of times it'd be close enough to one to grab it.
There's a hawk too.
Yeah.
Does the hawk actually carry you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can kill those doves too.
Oh,
really?
The first thing anybody would think of.
Well, you kill everything else in the game. Why not the doves?
That's true.
Not the deer.
You can take the lizard's tails without killing them.
Yeah, I did discover that. No, with the doves, it was really weird. I'm like, are the doves gonna fly away? I guess not, and accidentally swung the sword and killed one. And I'm like, and ever since then, I started repeating that over and over again. It's there's a strange satisfaction in doing this over and over again.
Oh my god.
You can shoot the lizard's tails with the bow.
Yep.
And the tail will disconnect from the lizard, and you can take it without killing the lizards.
Yeah, I don't have the time. I didn't have the time or patience for that, and I probably don't have the patience now.
Speaking of the time and patience, when I first played this on the PS2, I spent hours trying to collect all those tails, and I think I got halfway through the world when I just ran out of time and patience. There's a lot of them there. There's over 100, it seems like.
77. I collected all of them.
It takes a very long time. That's one of those things, if you have to collect them all, it's just really annoying that there's so many.
Marcus?
Oh, yeah. I noticed that the character has some pretty detailed animations. On the 6th Colossi in the side of that cavern area. I noticed at first, I was my character's rolling around, and it's just he does all these crazy animations, but I was oh cool, he's not falling off. Alright, cool. I can just gather grip, don't fall, please don't fall. And as my character is just tumbling back and forth, and he's kind of rocking back and forth on the back of the Colossus. So, because normally I'm used to a game around that era, most games probably wouldn't have that detailed animation, but I guess since it's just the Colossus and your character, they'd be oh cool, we can put a little bit more in here.
It's not quite ragdoll that they're using. At least from my perspective, because ragdoll, is more like you see in shooters where they just collapse like a stupid thing.
Yeah.
But like you look at it carefully and you're like, that's not quite ragdoll.
No,
so
it seems like they actually spent the time to make different animations.
Right. So that's really astonishing that they were able to put those details together. I completely agree. It's not exactly physics. It's like half physics and half animation.
I actually started thinking of it as my main character's main objective was just to tumble around. 'Cause I would just get on to like the safe shoulder area of the Colossus, and I would just start. He'd sit there to recover, and he was just doing these tumbles. I was like, this is ridiculous. Because I could tell at that point it wasn't. That's probably one of the easiest places to notice that it's not using ragdoll type of animations. It's using these, because he just keeps like tumbling into like whatever's blocking your path. And it was like, it would just happen. I just think in general the animations kind of ended up bugging me a bit more. Like I think if it was a more advanced, like more ragdoll or bones based, whatever type physics, where like if I'm gonna try to stab something, but I'm like stuck in this weird swinging animation or this rolling animation where I can't grab anything, I got the sense of I just don't like getting stuck in those animation cycles where you can't control your character.
You're just getting whipped around, kind of holding on.
Yeah, if I'm getting whipped around, it's fine, but it was never like, I just got the sense that after a while it was just these specific animations that I had to wait until they were finished before I could do something about it.
Is it just me, or as further you go through the game, the stun locks becomes longer? The stun lock being like you're thrown into the ground and you're just lying there for a while as you're mashing every button to try to wake up.
I could never tell the extent to which that was randomized because I would always try to mash and I couldn't quite glean if that made a difference.
It may just be like the lack of patience, but the later I got into the game, the longer they felt.
There definitely is, like, just going back to the animations for a second, like, I don't know how to describe it. I'm going to describe it as, like, procedural for lack of a better word, but there's some really, like, complex cases that they're using to evaluate, like, when to play certain animations. Because just watching lots of people play and, like, fight the same Colossus, like, in a different way, like, there's the one, I was just thinking of it because it's the one that I saw the most stun lock in as well, where it's chasing you around the area where it's knocking down the pillars, like quite fast one. And like Kat, when I was watching you fight it, once you got to the point where its weak point was exposed and you jumped onto it, like you killed it almost right away basically. But most everybody else I've seen fight that, it like shakes you quite a bit because it's most of the tinier ones shake you a lot when you're on them. And like Tara, when I watched you fight it, it was like doing what happened to me, which was like running around a lot and shaking you. And it seemed to be, as best I could tell, just that it was doing the same thing. It was playing the same animations, but it was just based on where you were gripping it. Like, Kat, it seemed like the location that you were on somehow, you know, I think it was just the physics of your particular location. You know, you were moving around less, and so you weren't triggering that animation of where you're like flipping around your hand where you can't go into the attack mode. So you can kind of like get, if you can find the right location, you can get like a good base, I guess, and then kind of just like go for it.
There's times, I wanted to get through the game quickly the second time because I was just trying to refresh myself. So there's times when I could keep stabbing with full force, and it was almost like a loop, like the Colossus would do its pain thing before it did its, and I would be able to get in a loop of just stabbing it, and it became very easy at that point. But then on the flip side, there's times when it was very frustrating because you get on, especially when you try to get on the head of something, and it was like whipping around constantly, and then you finally get the chance to try to attack it, and you try to do a full power attack, and before, just as you're grunting like you're about to do the attack, it starts whipping you around again. So
yeah, that happened to me a lot.
So I mean,
Seems funny how things don't want to get stabbed in the head.
it's just like I said about the timing, it's very peculiar, and I do think there's ways that but I never felt like I was playing the game better when I would get that exploit where I would just be able to stab it 3 or 4, however many times I could stab it in a row without it throwing me off. It felt like I was, just getting lucky more than the times when I thought I was playing well, but I just didn't have the chance to stab it once before it threw me off.
Well, like I said, like, because I can't even think of like a word to describe it. Obviously, I didn't have a really a way that I could replicate to like reproduce being in the right location. So it didn't feel like a strategic thing to me either. It did feel like a bit of luck, but I always enjoyed when it happened. But also I had that happen a lot where there were a lot of times where I had to go find a place to retreat to like regain stamina, because I wouldn't just like keep holding on. I was kind of cautious about that. So I'd have to like, where's the kind of most stable location I can stand on that's kind of near the weak point to regain some stamina. And I like that aspect. Like, to me, that just introduced another little challenge or thing to figure out.
I thought that the specific mechanic encouraged you to literally go at a different, safer location, because like I said, I took it as a AI manipulation encouraging method. So like if I had a situation like Alana where the Colossi would just swing its head really often, I would find a pause, just climb down on its shoulder, let it calm down for a minute, and then go back and say, "Ha, fooled ya!"
Well, yeah, I would try to do that, but it was hard to do anything when you get stuck in those swinging animations, because you can't change your position. You're just holding on to that one spot. So unless you can do something like where you fling yourself, you're pretty much stuck there. It's very hard to get off of it when it's... I don't know, I just felt like they made the Colossus do that too frequently, and the opportunity to move was too small.
Yeah, it's like the line between like feeling this David and Goliath like daunting relationship versus just getting frustrating seems like a real challenge to manage. And there were definitely some fights that pushed it over the line for me that were just frustrating. I found it was more the fast moving ones though, like the ones that would ram into you, and you would get knocked down into that like kind of temporarily unconscious state, because when you were referring to it, Taro, as stun lock, like I never thought of it in terms of stun lock, but that's exactly what it is, right? And that's just frustrating to me, like to a point where I feel completely powerless, like 100%, like this is just going to happen now. And I just have to wait for it to charge me again, because the one that knocked over the pillars, I think, was the worst case for me. And that like the timing of when it charged again seemed to so often, whether through chance or not, just line up with exactly when I just gotten up and have like a millisecond to try to roll out of the way or something, but not enough to really do much. But also the one with they had to knock off the edge of the cliff with like the fire thing or whatever. That one also, I had a lot of that going on in that battle. And those were the most frustrating cases for me.
What were the most frustrating battles for everyone else?
Most frustrating in Fate.
I was frustrated by a lot of them, but I feel like there's a, like, some people describe this as a puzzle game, which I think is good. Like I didn't want it to be a platformer. I wanted it to be like more of that puzzle game, but it's an interesting mix, because I definitely wouldn't give this to somebody who's just into puzzle games, because it has so much of that action element to it. So it's definitely a mix of the two, but I think I enjoyed the puzzle element of trying to figure out how to climb it and find the weak spots more than I like the action part, where you're trying to pull off these very timing specific. So that's where I would always get frustrated, was with the action elements. But the puzzle elements I enjoyed, like trying to figure out how to climb around certain things, or just figuring out how to get on it in the first place. All that stuff was, to me, the best part of the game. Was, we haven't even talked about like the graphics and stuff, but I mean, in terms of gameplay, the best part to me was the puzzle elements, and the action elements are what made it hard and maybe extended the life of the game, but I also found them frustrating.
I found the final boss to be really, 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 really frustrating.
What do you mean, the final Colossus or the
Yes.
final boss?
Malice. Completely stupid.
for whatever reason, my copy of the game, sometimes holding the R1 will still cause you to let go anyways. And this was most pronounced with the last final Colossus, when I would be holding the R1 button and Wander will just let go just because if he felt like it. It had nothing to do with the meter. The meter was like super full and he's like, nope, I don't care about my life anymore. So I had to climb up that Colossi like 10, 13 times, and it was a miserable experience.
I noticed the climbing part, which I remember this happened to me as well. We were talking about the movement sometimes being camera relative and not throwing you off when the camera pans. Some of the camera panning when you're climbing is really obnoxious in that section. Like I saw you jump and end up jumping out away from the Colossus, and I'm sure that happened to me as well in that sequence, because it's like the camera decides to pan in a weird way, like right at the point where you would jump, basically. And it seems to be fixed, and there's not a lot of way to override it.
Mm-hmm. The two other... Okay, so there's one other Colossi that I personally found frustrating, but remember I said earlier that I pretty much knew how to figure out the grand majority of the Colossi. The second one was actually the sand one, largely because I struggled trying to figure out how to climb onto it at all. That one was really hard. Oh, the tortoise one was also a lot more harder than I thought, largely trying to understand how to get it to stay on the geyser for a while.
Oh god, Vassaram. That's the first Colossus that actually made me cave and look something up online. I was so frustrated. I was like, I think I have to lure over the geysers, but nothing's happening when I do. And it turns out I had the right idea. You just have to time it and get the position so perfect. It's very frustrating.
And that one's like even weirder because when you look at how the Colossi flips, it flips the other side. You will normally expect it to flip the same, to have the exposed stomach on the same side the geyser was in, but no, it faces away from the geyser. So now you have to turn around, travel around the Colossi, then climb onto its stomach, and then finally getting all the way onto its back. It was really, really weird. So those were the ones that, for me, I found frustrating. The two that made me go like, okay, that is BS, was the one that was scared of the flames, because at no part in the game was the hand tool used ever except for picking up stuff, right? And, I mean, granted, okay, so you have this hint where if if the bull starts ramming onto the fireplace, then it'll throw a stick. And you're like, okay, I can grab a stick. What do you do with that stick? Like, I thought that was absolute BS, because at no part in the game does it ever teach you, what you can do with a stick, what you can put it onto a fire, and you can use it as a way of scaring away the Colossi. There was just simply nothing to iterate that specific game mechanic. So I thought that was BS that they had that one specific puzzle on this one specific instance towards the end of the game, in fact, and never cover it again, let alone covering it at all in the beginning.
Yeah, I was frustrated by that same fight, not just because of the fast-moving part, but I spent a long time stuck at that moment because I was trying to use my existing abilities, like pretty much every other fight. So I was trying to shoot an arrow through the fire, and just use my existing tools rather than this new, suddenly you have to use the stick and light it on fire and swing it and all this.
The last Colossi I also thought was BS, largely because the weak spots were not well exposed. Like, I understand that the grand majority of the weak spots, it's programmed this way, that you're supposed to be, climbing towards it, be near at a certain vicinity to be able to actually see the weak spot. Except there's there's at least two weak spots where it doesn't expose regardless of how close you are. And there's one weak spot that is always too far away that you never know it's a weak spot at all, which is the palm or the back of the hand of that boss. That is a weak spot, and yet it never exposes itself. And the left shoulder is a weak spot, but you're always too far away from it to ever find out that that's supposed to be a weak spot at all. Although it was interesting that was That was the one boss where it would have constantly tried to shake it off its head no matter what, and would not give you much of an opportunity. That definitely was an interesting part because, you were supposed to stab at its shoulder before you clamp onto its head, stab it, and then repeat, and then go back to its shoulder and repeat the cycle over and over again. So, I thought I liked that part of it, but I didn't like the part where you couldn't see that weak spot at all. It felt like it broke its own visual language just for the sake of this very specific boss.
Yeah, I agree. I felt like the last one was one of the weakest. It's unfortunate.
This is a game full of boss battles. That's how it's described usually. And I think that comes with the baggage of boss battles are often frustrating in games, I think. So you have a full game full of potentially frustrating battles where it's not... I think where they probably wanted it to be, judging by all the controls and everything, I think they wanted this game to be realistic. And I probably would have made it a bit more gamey in terms of trying to make the controls a little easier, make the bosses a little bit more predictable just from a gameplay perspective so that the player would be able to more easily interpret it. Because I think, if you make a pure physics game, it can feel really intuitive, but it can also be potentially, the closer you get to pure real world mechanics and such and AI, you can make it extremely difficult for the player. But if there's things when you think of a typical boss fight, there are loops and things you do, and this game has that, but because it's a little bit more realistic than your typical game, I guess it just feels more difficult. You're talking about position and momentum and all this stuff. It just, to me, I think it tries to be a little too realistic sometimes, which adds to the frustration of the boss battles. Whereas in most other games, you have all that easy battle stuff, which makes you feel good and powerful, and then the boss battles are a little bit more usually scripted. There's a lot less going on in a typical game, I guess.
I was really grateful for the traveling sections, actually. I remember people having mixed opinions of those when the game first came out. It's not enough to do, but in terms of pacing, if I had just fought one that I found frustrating, I liked having a little more time to just wander around and relax a little, because it is very tranquil.
It's to me, that's part of the puzzle, is finding the next things.
But it's much more laid back, I guess, puzzle solving than the battles are, which is nice.
It's good downtime.
I was curious. Oh, sorry. I was just curious, since we talked about some least favorites. Does anybody have any favorite?
Funny, I was just about to get started on that. No, it's okay.
Favorite bosses or favorite things in general?
I was thinking favorite bosses, but I guess favorite anything, favorite moments.
Oh, I thought you said least favorite.
Favorite.
I was not. We're talking about the last guy, Malice. I have mixed feelings about Malice. I really like the design. I think it's interesting how it's like a building and that it's completely static and you have to climb up it. I think it's an interesting deviation from the moving living creatures we'd encountered previously. So I don't mind that aspect of it. I just hated that there's that part where it grabs you with its hand and you're supposed to attack its palm. You have no hints whatsoever that you should do so. Absolutely none. No glowing, no nothing. Dorman is completely quiet for that fight, maybe.
Yeah.
He just does not have any input to give you, which is...
Is it one of those things where you discovered it out of frustration?
No, I looked it up. Yeah.
I just treated it as you've gotten this far, time to figure one out, instead of it having the glowy light, and you walk to the light and stab the light and then move to the next one.
Yeah. But the weird thing is, he does have glowing lights.
He does, yeah.
So it makes even less sense why,
some of them wouldn't work.
Some of them works and some of them don't.
Yeah, exactly. His back glows, the spot on his arm glows, but then just nothing for the hand, which I was stuck on that for ages. I got flung so many times. Actually, that's another reason I didn't really like the Malice fight much. I fell from staggering heights. I should have died. But instead, like, Wander, I could get up with, like, about maybe third of my HP gone. Like, I was like, oh, alright, plenty of time to regain that on the long climb up. And I did, so it just felt very... I don't know if that's it was like maybe it was a consequence of having all that health and stamina because you killed so many colossi, but I feel like at a certain point when you just fall from a certain height, your character should have just been dead.
I think it's an anti-frustration measure, honestly.
Yeah.
It really did feel like they were trying to differentiate that fight in a lot of ways from the previous ones, but every method of differentiation that they employed felt like a step in the wrong direction to me from the other ones. Like, the fact that it's more of a just static thing is like, to me, a big part of the hook of the game was the excitement of like having to climb around on these moving creatures. So that felt just more like the platforming in like other environmental sections of the game, and it just wasn't as interesting. I felt like, obviously people already mentioned, like, it felt like they tried to spike the difficulty a little bit at the end by just not having a visual weak point for the last two bits, but again, that's just kind of an arbitrary, like, obnoxious change in a lot of ways. And last but not least, I was thinking about again, we haven't talked much about the graphics, but I was thinking about the kind of desaturated color scheme in the game, and I love the presentation of the world, but in the context of like games since then, I feel like kind of like there's something about the brown and gray of this game that doesn't feel like a lot of games that came after it. But for some reason, when I was just watching Taro, when I was watching you play that last bit, there's, the first part of it is kind of like a cover shooter almost, and then like you're running from barricade to barricade, and it's very brown and gray. And it was the most like Gears of War like that the game got. And it was just like, I don't know, I didn't really like any aspect of that. Like, so many of the aspects of the last battle are...
There's a lot of parts in the game that made me think, is this a brown shooter? Because whatever post effect that they're using, I think they're using the what is it called? The eye adoption filter. You can tell it kind of works in the sense, like, if you have any moments where you're coming out from a shadow, it just suddenly whitewashes everything before finally bringing back in the color. Like, that was the single effect that I thought absolutely hurt the graphics the most. There's a lot of moments where it works, such as the moment I described, but the grand majority of the moments, it makes the sky look completely brown. It makes the landscape very barren and uninteresting. Like, there was almost no color to the game whatsoever.
I feel like that's that's done very intentionally for this like wasteland setting, and it mostly is something that I really like about the game.
I recognize it was done intentionally, but it was not a style I liked, which is what I'm admitting. I mean, like, a lot of part of the games, I was using the whole sword light thingy just to bring color back.
Interesting. I didn't find the landscape devoid of color, actually. I mean,
mind you, there's a lot of places where, like, there's a lot of green, and there's a lot of blue skies, and those are nice, but...
Yeah, and then there's, like, soft, peachy deserts and lakes, gray stone. I found there was a lot of variety, personally.
I think it fits with the time style, because, I mean, a lot of the other games, that was, like, isn't that 2005? That seems like the mid-2000s was when, like, everything started going towards the browns and grays, color scheme, and everything.
I'm like, this must have been the predecessor, right? They must have set the standard for all these other shooters to say, like, we gotta make this a brown shooter.
It's not just like browns and grays, like you're saying, Kat. It's just kind of like desaturated, and everything's like a little washed out, or feels kind of like ethereal, which I think is appropriate. Like, so I really like the setting of the game. But I guess that last fight is like, it's kind of darker in general. Like, the lighting is darker, everything's a little more grim and gritty. And then there happens to be that one section where you're going from cover point to cover point, which is very evocative of Gears of War for me.
Sometimes the bloom is also really overwhelming as well. You can't really see the doves all that well, and half the time I was thinking, did they just like goof the dove so that it kind of looks like this weird paper origami thing, and they called it a day. But no, I think it's just a post effects. The dove was actually detailed to look like a dove, and the bloom made it look like paper.
A dove?
Doves.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I know what you mean. The use of bloom was something I was thinking about while watching people play this time, because I was like, bloom became super trendy. Like,
Right.
it probably was already trendy by the time Shadow came out, but I felt like they used it in a way that again was a little different from other games. Like, they really just kind of poured it on, but in a very intentional way. Like, whereas a lot of other games just overuse bloom because it's like a default thing at this point. I feel like oh, isn't that cool?
You're referring to the lighting effect?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I personally, based on the feel of the game, like I said, I always felt like bad for about what I was doing, and just the fact that it's a abandoned type of world. I felt like that graphical appearance of it was the artistic appearance of everything to me did kind of help with the emotional feeling of it, whereas I feel like some of the more modern games that try to be gritty and stuff don't have that type of, I don't know, like I don't think it was doing it to try to be realistic. It was doing it to portray like the feeling of it's like it's the Forbidden Lands. It's like a place that's almost otherworldly. But I enjoyed right from the beginning. I enjoyed the sense of scale. I can almost see that because the character was a low poly model. That when they show you those wide shots and the Colossus and everything, the graphics have this sense of scale of making you feel small, and I don't think adding color to it would, like, trying to feel good about the world or good about yourself was not necessarily like the point that I was getting from the game. So I think by not having a lot of color and life to the world put me in the right mood to feel like I should kill these things.
A random question to people who have the HD remaster: did they fix the pop-in?
It's still there.
That constantly put me out of the game whenever the boulders just suddenly pop into their actual, level of detail they should be in, and I'm like, why do you do that to me? And it'll be like the entire landscape that'll happen.
I feel like it was less dramatic in the HD version, but it's been a while since I played it.
And it's even more interesting playing it in stereoscopic 3D. Just like, okay.
Yeah, I think when I think about this game, and this brings me to expanding on the feeling of scale. When it came out in 2005, I know there's like God of War and all that stuff, but I didn't really care for God of War because of the violence and the QuickTime events and all that. This to me was the real version of that, where you're fighting something huge and it's not a QuickTime event. It was just such a. I mean, it does run choppy on the PS2, but I felt like this game really pushed the limits of what could be done at that time. And one of the reasons I felt like I should get a PS2 at all was this game, because it was really doing some amazing things. So even for the HD and the 3D remake on the PS3, obviously they increased the resolution, but I still feel like in some ways this game might be pushing what the PS3 can do. Because I mean, the PS3, it does stereoscopic 3D, but it's not like, it's doing some tricks, I think, to be able to pull off, because I don't think it's doing 1080p with both.
Yeah, in order to do it in stereoscopic, they had to drop the frame rate down to 30.
Yeah, so I mean, they're pulling some tricks to pull
Solid 3
off.
lock, by the way? Sorry, I don't mean to cut you
It's
off.
hard to say.
I couldn't say. How would I check the frame rate?
Oh, no,
exactly?
no. Like, did you notice any frame rate drops, in other words?
I didn't seem to. No, it seemed. I mean, when I was even playing it, it to me it didn't even seem like it was 30 frames. It seemed like it was faster.
Because like one other thing, I was blaming my endeavors with the final boss and cussing every single word I can at it, was the frame rate would just drop to 15, like to a clearly choppy level, and then like it happened very, very often.
Yeah, I don't know about the the stereoscopic version, but definitely just like playing the HD version on a normal monitor, the frame rate is much more consistent, which I enjoyed. But yeah, like talking about just the visuals at the time, like obviously the level of detail in the pop-in stuff like is something that it's hard not to notice to a degree, but I felt like it was worth it for the trade-off, which is like everything in this game, like not everything, but so many of the decisions are made to make you feel lonely, right? And like to me, the main thing I remember about first getting out into like the Forbidden Lands, like the Wasteland part, was just the distance you could see, like just into the distance, where it felt like this really vast open area and you don't see any other living things, and like you go far away from the temple but you can still see it off in the distance, like where it should be kind of. And like that to me was worth it. I think that's why they went to the trouble of doing this sort of level of detail system rather than just having fog at like a certain point or anything like that. Is like you want to have that vastness of like being able to see into the distance, and it makes you feel more alone, I think. So that to me was like an okay trade-off, for like the level of detail stuff, which I kind of just accepted or got used to like after a while.
Did anyone actually play this game thinking this was going to be fun and killing monsters?
Yeah, I think when I originally bought it, it's like cool. Yeah.
Well, okay, let me rephrase that. Alana said like she was playing it and she felt like she was doing the wrong thing. Did anyone feel exactly the opposite?
I felt necessary because it's like oh well, we don't know who this girl is, but she's important. Kill everyone.
No, they said, I think the voice said she wasn't important. She was just a girl, like the one who's talking to him in the beginning. The
Dorman.
Saying something about she's just a simple maid or something.
But still, I don't know, the way that the Wanderer just came there and was like, I don't care. Let's fix this.
Yeah, like to me, whenever somebody says I don't care the consequences, that's like the definition of the ends justify the means. And to me, that's always a bad thing to just do whatever it takes. I mean, it's like the definition of like selfish, or not selfishness, but
Yeah, that's how I felt about the character. Was like, okay, he's a very selfish character that I'm controlling now, and it kind of set the tone for everything. So I didn't
he's
like
both selfless and selfish at the same time.
Yeah, I will say though, even despite that, there were like moments in the individual battles where I was just having fun. Like,
oh god, yes, absolutely.
So
the music makes you feel pretty cool.
No, it did. It made me feel totally awesome.
I felt great when I was able to grab onto him and like that triumphant music is playing. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna kill the thing, and then you kill the thing, and then the sad music starts, and you're like, oh, I killed the thing.
So, quick trivia, and then I'll go back to my opinion. In regards to Shadow of the Colossus has been obviously being put into art exhibits, and I happen to have the luxury of knowing what the curators, or going to the presentation of the curators for Art of Video Games exhibit that happened at the Smithsonian Art Museum. And they said the reason for choosing Shadow of the Colossus was largely because it was a game about doing something they did not feel like they wanted to do. And to them, that felt like a very fresh take on a video game, where the industry is mostly about, power fantasy, doing what you want to do because you can't do it in real life. Whereas in this game, it's a deconstruction of a power fantasy, right? It would, there's a point where, yeah, it's great that you're all powerful and stuff, but that is not necessarily the right thing to do, kind of thing. So I do find it fascinating that, Alana, you felt that way when playing the game. I, on the other hand, felt exactly the opposite. I felt very much like Travis Touchdown in No More Heroes, who is, for people who doesn't have any context, Travis Touchdown is that high school guy who you're like, oh gosh, I'm so glad I'm over that phase anymore. I'm over that phase, but like he's still in that teenager phase of everything is a power fantasy. Every boss is there to be killed, despite the fact that very clearly there's a few bosses that says they don't want to be killed. And like, so he just kind of takes everything as an opportunity to show off how cool he is.
Doesn't he literally say, like, I'm going to be number one?
Yes.
Climbing the ranks.
And Wander very much makes me feel like, okay, this is Travis Touchdown, except pared down for this fairy tale setting. But, like,
I don't know.
He's nothing like Travis Touchdown.
I don't think his motivation is presented as quite as obnoxious as that. It's still presented in a way where you're encouraged to question it. But, like, I feel like the game tries to give you a motivation that you can somewhat...
Okay, I mean, they give you reason
understand a little better.
They give you reason to make you more sympathetic of him versus Travis, who gets no sympathy from me whatsoever. Anyways, but yeah, it did a good job of making me feel like Travis Touchdown. I had a lot of fun being those bosses, and I felt like a complete awesome guy for doing it. It's like, wow, this is a lot of fun.
Do you think his motivation? Was just because this girl was unfairly sacrificed, or was it like a love story or something?
I think he just wanted a prize.
Who?
Wander.
I don't think so.
What are you talking about?
For killing all the Colossus.
For killing all the Colossus.
No.
He knew about them from the beginning. That was always his goal.
I
Then this chick died, and he was like, hey, excuse.
I don't feel like I know this girl is like sacrificed because she had a cursed fate or something, but I felt the way she's always sitting there, kind of like the Sleeping Beauty type thing.
Right.
It felt weird to me, like some kind of like weird love story, or she has some kind of prize to win at the end. And it was kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like it.
Yeah. I
mean, they didn't present it. The main character itself is questionable. Anyways,
what was the motivation? Like, it's obviously to bring her back to life, but for what purpose?
Like, what was their relationship?
For all we knew before the game started, they were boyfriend and girlfriend. For months.
Actually, that's not confirmed.
Right, we don't know. We have no clue what's going on.
Maybe there were siblings. Who knows?
She is the prize of the game,
right?
Her life.
No, I agree with that, and I thought that in a way the game was a subversion to that damsel in distress story.
No. Yes, actually, I would agree.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I just didn't buy it like that. All this was worth it. It seemed like.
Well, nobody buys a damsel in distress story, I hope.
Yeah,
because a human being as a prize is a stupid thing to do.
Oh, and I definitely had like similar feelings about is it Mono or Mono or whatever?
Mono.
Mono. About like the kind of use of that character as basically just like a prop, I guess, or just like a plot justification for stuff to happen. And it seems like while the game I feel like is maybe trying to subvert it to a degree, and in that like the character is being very open about having this like ends justify the means approach, and then like has horrible consequences for that character in the end. Like it just didn't seem like that wasn't to me the most well developed part of the story of the game. And that's why like when I think about the characters in the game, like I find your relationship with Aggro like a lot more interesting and developed, because it's developed through gameplay and through all these design decisions, whereas like Mono like is just kind of there. It's like a constant reminder of like your goal, I guess, not really doing anything beyond that. And it's interesting in contrast to Yorda as well in Eco. Like because I feel like, you know, both Shadow of the Colossus and Eco have that in common, that like there's this central aspect of like your relationship with an AI controlled character that you're with through most of the game. And in Eco, it's Yorda. And like a lot of people really love that relationship because it's like a character with a more active role. But at the same time, like Yorda is kind of Yorda's active, but she's like a damsel in Eco, and that like, you know, she can't fight for herself, so you have to keep defending her from these shadow creatures. And then like her other main role is like she opens up doors, so she's kind of like a magical key or something. And so like those aspects, like I didn't feel like it was that much stronger necessarily. Like there are some things like the hand holding thing in Eco, and the fact that she can help you like get over ledges. Like she does help. But I felt like the horse was like actually a better developed version of like Yorda in a weird way, like what they were trying to accomplish with it.
The horse is helping you, and like in this game, she's like, you don't even have. I can't even, because I just watched the intro again. I mean, I was playing through the game. It's like the main character doesn't have any apparent emotional or like there's just nothing there for me to like at least in the other game you develop a relationship and there's some kind of, you're seeing the bond form between them to some extent through the gameplay. But in this one, it's just she's laying there and your character has no like there's no sense that real connection in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, anything about their relationship is implicit, and there's not a lot to even imply anything in a particular direction beyond just like, obviously Wander's going through a lot of trouble to make this happen, so maybe it implies that Mona was important to Wander in some way that we don't know what. Like,
I mean,
when she was alive.
I don't know, it's my opinion, but I'm glad they didn't go over it at all, because, like, I didn't particularly care for the character, and
that's why they should have done
it. And in a way that works for me from my gameplay perspective, because I like collecting fruits and newt tails. So the fact that I did not have a single care for this character kind of gave me an excuse. And not only that, but also the main character being named Wander right from the bat, or right from the get-go. Like, that gave me an excuse to just do whatever the heck I wanted. And at the very least, I felt like it was kind of deliberate in the sense that there was no urgency whatsoever with the game. It was something that you approach it at your own pace. And I think like that was, and I like to think that was the reason why there was no characterization between the two.
It's just another thing that provides characterization for the main character, which, I mean, I can definitely understand not liking that decision. Like, that's really Mona's only role, is to kind of...
They fridged her, basically.
Right.
She was a set piece. You don't really need her to have any story. You're either there to help her or you're there not to help her.
I do agree with the fact that, you know, having a set piece be a human being is not a particularly right choice.
Stinks.
Zelda 2 did it.
Yeah, and that stunk too.
I will say, like, it's one more thing. Maybe you don't need yet one more thing that made me feel lonely, I guess. And it did kind of reinforce the goal of the game. Like, probably when I was playing it, because, like, so much of the game is me alone in this vast space. Like, I developed a bond with Aggro. I developed a bit of a bond with each individual Colossus. And then every time that I would then go back to the temple and see like Mono sleeping, like I did want Mono to like wake up so I could like have some interaction, and so the character could actually do something. Also, you know, whatever else would come from having another human there that you can talk to.
It to me kind of, I mean, maybe this is just looking back on it with my more experienced eyes, but it just felt like the way it was all, she's like on a temple or something, it just typifies this like love makes people do stupid things, and like he's gonna do all this bad stuff that he knows is bad just because he has like a crush on a girl, and it just, to me, it typified, this is stupid.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the tragedy of it all.
He's putting her on this pedestal, literally, and it's like the light shining down, and there's doves. I'm like, what the hell? This is just a person. Like, they're not worth more than you or anyone else.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Initially, I didn't like that aspect. I went into the game thinking that Mono and Wander had a more equal relationship, like they'd been involved with each other, but I read some essays after I beat the game and stuff, or just like some people like, you know, contributing their thoughts and analysis, and kind of come to the conclusion that Mono and Wander might not have actually formally known each other at all, actually. Like, it was purely a case of a stalker with a crush, I guess, for lack of a better trope that I can think of right now, but, you know, it was more, he had kind of a blind infatuation with her, I think, maybe.
But, I mean, all these things are things that people have imposed on it, right? Like, I don't think the game necessarily gives you enough to go on to say, like, he had a crush on her, or, like, he was a stalker, or...
Oh, no. I'm not
like,
saying he was a stalker.
No, I know. I'm not saying, like, anybody's individual interpretation is wrong, but that was the part that I guess I liked about it, was that it seemed like it was intentionally going more for, like, a trope style or, like, a fairy tale kind of presentation.
Yeah, that's why I liked it.
It's definitely a fairy tale. That's why I don't like fairy tales that much either. Because they make the characters do really irrational things.
Yeah. At least with your interpretation at the end, maybe it's good that Wander turns into a big baby. Then Mono then presumably takes care of. That's lovely as well.
Fairy tales are supposed to be, you know, lessons in the end, right? So don't
I
go
did-
and sacrifice a bunch of monsters to bring somebody back to life. Now we know.
I told you.
I did like the twist that Mono does come back to life. It's so often that whenever you hear the making a deal with the devil story, that you neither get the reward and you just get punished for it. But at least in this case, like, the output of the contract came through, and she did actually come back, presumably thanks to Dormani. And, you know, things obviously did not go as planned, but I felt like that was a genuinely interesting twist in the story.
I never really expected him to have a happy ending, I guess. I pretty much figured he was going to die or something, but the fact that he lived at all was...
Yeah.
Even though it's probably not him anymore, but
Yeah.
that's another story.
Yeah, that's up to player interpretation.
It's
I
not-
like to think it was a new being created
Yeah.
from Dorman and Wander, and that's it. Fresh slate.
It's not like it's not like you can be a kid and have all the knowledge and experiences. I don't know. It would just be weird.
Yeah. Nah.
But that'll be up to Mono's responsibility, right? Or aggro. Probably aggro.
Aggro.
You mentioned about aggro, the horse. I only ever interpreted the horse as a tool, and I never made a connection with it at all, which was interesting. I kind of liked the game more as more Colossus died, really, because now I can see more of the map, and I have a lot more landmarks, and I can navigate it better. So, like, I had exactly the opposite effect of, you know, if the game was meant to make me feel lonely, I felt better being lonelier as the game further went along.
Huh. That's odd. Right from the get-go, I kind of had a bit of a fatalistic approach toward the Colossi and towards aggro, actually, because I don't know when, but, you know, this is a really, really well-loved game, and people write lots of stuff about it, and I think at some point in my life I must have read an article about it, and I read something about, you know, for each Colossus Wander kills, he gets a little more degenerated and becomes more monstrous. So I knew that was coming, and I also knew that aggro died. That I also just I think I would have guessed that anyway, because it's a powerful thing to kill off your single companion in a big empty landscape. But
this actually reminds me of again, it's like using something as a prop. Like, we'll make the player feel bad by trying to kill off the one thing helping you. Again, I guess if it wasn't used as so much of a tool during the whole game, maybe I'd feel more about it. But it did feel a little forced to me that they were doing that. And it reminds me of something I heard recently, that the guy who made Peter Molyneux, or whoever made Fable 2, said the plot of the story is you have a dog and it dies. And then he just walks out. That's the plot. So it's build the story around that. Or maybe it's Fable 3. Whatever. Anyway, the point is, this is something that they typically do, and it's a fable or a fairy tale, so it's kind of like what you expect. But to me, it doesn't necessarily make it any less cringy when they do it anyway. It doesn't necessarily, because you could see it kind of coming to some extent. It didn't really affect me too much when they tried to kill off the horse.
I definitely formed a feeling of a bond with aggro over the course of the game, but that's the part that I remember more than the part where aggro falls is off the cliff and whatever.
Feels
that
a cheap thing that you can't even.
Yeah, I mean it did feel a little bit forced, and I like that aggro didn't die. Actually,
I hated that.
I thought that was fine because I wasn't I don't know, that wasn't the part to me that was memorable, and it had a kind of cutscene logic to it, as I recall. I don't remember exactly how it's set up, but it felt kind of now's the time when this has to happen in the story, and because aggro is such a tank, invincible tank elsewhere, it's that kind of thing where you can take 1,000 bullets in the shooter in gameplay, and then
or
suddenly
ride up a sand monster,
and suddenly in the cutscene you die from a single bullet kind of thing. So it didn't. Yeah, I kind of get why that might not have been a very affecting moment for some people.
I like to think that in some parallel universe that I've created, that scene I actually had to go through 3 times. The first time because I didn't go without aggro and I died. Second time I did go with aggro and we both died.
How did you manage that?
And then finally it played a cutscene properly and aggro was the only one that fell off. So in my parallel universe thing, we just kept doing this over and over again until we did it right. But aggro just decided, no, this was just not a story for him, and let you go.
Is it entirely a cutscene? I can't even remember with that part. Do you make any kind of decision about what you're doing?
Well, if you do it right, then the horse is going to die. I mean,
yes.
There's no way to save the horse.
If you do it right...
can you kind of tell that ahead of time? Because I remember, is it a collapsing bridge or a thing you have to jump over that you can't?
It collapses behind you as you go across it.
Right. Okay. I think the moment you start walking on the final block is when it triggers the cutscene. So that's the only time when it actually plays that.
But you don't make a Mario and Yoshi style decision to hop off in midair or anything, do you?
No, aggro bucks you in the cutscene.
Yeah. So it's kind of character development for aggro. A little bit. Hey, thanks, buddy.
I didn't form any sort of attachment with aggro throughout the game. I didn't see him as a tool either. He was just there. He was my transportation. He was my car in Grand Theft Auto.
That is a tool.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking tool as in
It's kind of the only reason aggro is there for me was you don't want to walk for 30 minutes. So
exactly.
You get there faster.
Right. Now, when the bridge fell and he fell down into the ravine, I didn't really feel much because at that point, it was the point of no return. Okay, this is the end of the game. There's no time to mourn him, But when at the very end, when I did see him limping in, that's when I was like, oh, that's too bad for him. He kind of hurt himself, and that's when I kind of felt a little bit more of an attachment when I saw that he'd survived. Not because I didn't want him to survive, but because he did survive. He's a perseverer.
Although there wasn't that much of a decision to it, really, I guess you could argue. Like, I think it was the after the fact part that was a little more memorable to me, in that, like, the whole characterization of Wander is like this single-minded character that's going to just perform this task, like, no matter what. And like, after what to me was like, the closest thing to a companion I had in the game, what had, like, fallen into this, ravine or whatever, and like sacrificed itself to allow me to finish off the quest. It's like there's no going back. Not that there was before, but it's like a very conscious. It's just like re-highlighting that in a very. It's like calling more attention to it, and that, like, we're not going to go back and try to help aggro or see if aggro's okay. We're going to, like, keep doing this terrible thing that we're doing. So it was like, to me, it was a moment of characterization for, like, both of them. It worked for me in the sense that I did feel a bond that I guess other people didn't feel.
I liked the horse.
I liked him too, even though I knew he was doomed and that he was put in there specifically so I could get attached to him.
Doomed, really.
Oh yeah.
To me, I took it as a more as a character development for Wander himself, because like his reaction to it is surprise, then, well, I gotta finish my job. Clap, clap. So like,
Aggro's like Buddy from another world.
So like, to me, it felt like Wander was just not a person to stick around for mourning. He has a duty to do, and he has to finish it, which I commend for. I like characters like that, to be completely honest, no matter how single-minded they are and no matter how evil they are. So
I feel
to me, like, that was kind of like the first time where I had a much more stronger attachment to Wander as a character.
Mm.
Although, he still reminds me a lot of Travis Touchdown.
I feel like for characters to really mean something, I have to see some kind of vulnerability, some kind of change. And the fact that neither Mono, the dead girl, or the horse really changed at all. Like, they had no weaknesses, like I was mentioning them being indestructible. Whereas, and I think that's why, again, I see them both as props to they're like a typical thing. And maybe they were doing it to kind of throw shade at fairy tales, but to me it seemed more like they're just emulating fairy tales. And it's almost like, where they focused all their attention was mostly on the main character and the Colossuses themselves, which did move around, which did feel pain, which die. There was some sense that the Colossuses were really alive, and you were mostly alive, but the horse and the dead girl really did feel like props to me that were just parts of, they were the tools of the story.
I feel like they paid a lot of attention to the behavior of the horse. Like, is it just? Do you mean just because it's invincible? Like, it can't get permanently killed?
It has. I mean, to me, it just seemed like transportation. It didn't have. Again, like, you didn't have a real emotional reaction to it. You just scream louder when it's farther away and whistle. You kind of kick it and hit it. Like, there's no need to feed it. If you shoot it or hit it, it just kind of wanders away. It does reacts to the Colossuses, but I never felt a need to protect her or anything. It was just like I was protecting myself because I had hit points and I felt danger for myself. But the horse was just something I would try to lure the Colossus with. It was like just a tool. Like, it just was, because it didn't have any needs. It was just, I feel like the game makers didn't, and maybe there's a game decision, like they couldn't allow it to die or something, but there's other games where there was something like that, and they, even though it couldn't die, you could feel sorry for it if it got hurt or something, or become immobilized or something.
Like what game?
There's games where you have companion animals and such that could take damage to the point where they get knocked down, or they might have needs that you have to fulfill, or they get weakened or something. But it just
Paper Mario.
there's tons of games where they do that type of
Resident
stuff.
Evil 4. Like, no, she got kidnapped again. Like, no, don't kill her.
I feel like they focus so much on the Colossuses, which is great because those are awesome, but they just kind of, I don't know, I feel like, like those main elements of the horse and the girl just kind of didn't get the same type of treatment.
Those apart in the game, if you just let one or aggro go, she'll just kind of, I don't know whether to address the gender of this horse. They'll just
the
kind
way
of
that the designer said he envisioned the horse as a she, but
Mm.
the North
Typical.
American manual refers to aggro as a he, so whatever. I would say she.
Anyways, what I was gonna say was like, if you just let it go, it'll actually just do whatever the heck it wants to do. Which I guess what the intent behind that was to kind of give it more personality. But I don't know. I never particularly felt I never felt like the horse itself had more personality or like had its mind of its own. I just felt like, oh, this is a really intelligent AI I can manipulate, just like the Colossus.
Why do you feel frustrated when your avatar doesn't do what it's supposed to do then? The character you control, why do you have feelings about that and not the horse?
Because it's an NPC.
The main character has some sense of motivation. The horse just does whatever you want for the most part. If you leave it alone long enough, or if it's attacked by Colossus, it does react, but it's pretty much does whatever you want it to do. It's not really...
My character does what you want it to do, not what.
Well, but
Yeah.
you can do... You don't have to kill the Colossus. You have control over the character. I mean...
Well, in order to play Shadow of the Colossus, you have to kill the Colossus.
Not necessarily. I mean,
Well, I
Well,
mean,
what else are you gonna do?
You can ride your horse
collect the
around.
Oh, you can
Sightsee.
you can collect 77 fruit. Like some people like to do.
37 lizard tails, man.
I will say, so my main point of reference for the horse, and this was playing Shadow of the Colossus when it came out. Like the only other game I'd played that had horseback riding was Ocarina of Time with Epona, and Epona controls like a tank, and when you're riding Epona, you control Epona directly.
Completely, which is ridiculous.
So just that difference of like my realization towards the very beginning, I think most people go through this still with this game, is like, oh, I'm controlling the reins. Like, this is different. Like, and maybe you get used to it to the point where it's functionally not that different over time, or you get used to when to allow aggro to take over. But that was like conceptually a very different thing. Like that alone put me in a different mindset compared to the character. And like, yes, I realize it's a set of AI algorithms. Like, I've worked as an AI programmer. Like, I get it. But that just wasn't the feeling that I had. Like, I just felt like, wow, this is different from this other case that I've had. Like, they've made a clear decision here to try to imbue this creature with more of a personality, with more of its own, agenda at times. And it's like, most people that I've heard describing their relationship with aggro is like initially is frustration because there's like a learning curve to that. I think like that alone was a decision that like I still find to be a fairly brave decision in terms of the game, and that like that's something that could turn off a lot of players who are easily frustrated like right at the beginning. And you mentioned like thinking of it as a tool and its only purpose is transportation. But it's like, in the same way as all the other design decisions we've talked about, like, there's no reason why transportation needs to be required in the game. Like, there's no reason why you have to traverse these long distances necessarily to get to the Colossi. That's like a design decision that was made. And I think that those decisions were made with a very particular purpose. And to me...
I would just say it's the scale, because the place is so large and the Colossi are so large. You need something that can make you move faster. because otherwise it just takes too long.
Oh, hey, Wind Waker showed us that you can have impossibly long distances and spend 30 minutes going from one area to the next, or an hour or two.
Well, you could have just been teleported around, I think. Getting around to see the entire landscape and everything was part of the game. And
Right, so what's the purpose of this desolate landscape that you have to traverse, and the fact that really the only way to traverse it, reasonably is with aggro, like in partnership with aggro? Like, why were those decisions made?
Why was it a horse versus a car?
And I mean that's obviously that's separate from whether the intention had the desired effect on you, which I understand.
I know what they were
Answer, you
trying
can
to
jump off of a horse.
I mean, they could have always given the character the ability to run, but they didn't do that.
It just felt like another forced thing that they were trying to make you feel, but it didn't work because they didn't actually, in my opinion, do the things you have to do to actually make that horse a character. They did all the things that are supposed to make you feel like the fact that you need this thing and that it sacrifices itself for you. It's like trying to check all these boxes.
It's all very one way though, isn't it? Like it's like you said, it's not a relationship where you like nourish aggro by like finding food and bringing it to aggro.
I gave him lots of pets. I gave him extra pets when I figured he was going to die. I was like, I feel
you
that
can press the
cutscene
button
coming
to like
on.
pet it, right?
I just I petted him like 3 times in a row. Like, I know you're going to die now, bud. It's okay, bro.
It just feels like more.
I don't know. I taught aggro to be suicidal.
You should have pet aggro.
I did. It didn't like do anything. Like the horse didn't really react.
Yeah, sure he did. He looked at you a little. He'd make a little noise.
Yeah, aggro likes it.
No, you just gotta keep an eye on him. He's actually kind of
Our
subtle.
smiles are very low key. You gotta be very observant.
Was this all because you were constantly sword slapping this horse?
I mean, you can ride this horse and just keep kicking and slapping it to make it go faster, and it doesn't make a difference. It'll just keep going. It doesn't slow down or anything. You just keep kicking and kicking and kicking.
To clarify, I'm not trying to say that you're wrong for not forming a bond with aggro, but I do think that there was as much attention paid to the design of aggro as there was to the design of the Colossi and the other central aspects of the game. Like I feel like they were trying to make it this game's like version of the Yorda player character relationship in Eco.
The thing is, if aggro had been able to die or was particularly vulnerable, that would have opened him up to be kind of a burden to other players. So it's a really fine line, like how much. And I think in a game like this, where you're fighting gigantic monsters on an epic scale, anything that can withstand that kind of damage, anything that can help you in this seemingly impossible fight just by being able to take care of itself no matter what, seems like more of an asset than just another thing you have to protect in addition to yourself. Like, I know if I had to, like, care for aggro on top of finding all these dumb colossi and then beating them to a pulp with my sword, I'd be irritated. I'd be like, no, I don't want to feed you frigging grass right now. Go away. I've got monsters to kill. Just, ugh.
Well, even if the horse dies on your first monster, what do you do for the rest of the game? You walk around for 5 hours?
Yeah, I know, right?
That would be a good mod. Shadow of the Colossus. Be interesting.
Strolling edition.
There's a lot of incidental interactions that we've talked about, like people just remembering you can pat aggro, but there's all these things that, the thing I was talking about like hanging onto the side of the saddle, like I mentioned, I theoretically think there might be some times when that could be useful, but it's not really in there to be useful in the way that, like, if they were designing aggro as just a tool, like they wouldn't put in things like patting it or being able to do these like goofy moves that don't really come into play fighting the Colossi.
I'm not saying that. I mean, I know you're not saying that either. I'm not saying that those decisions were valid, and I do agree that I do think those decisions were very deliberate, but at the same time, they didn't do anything for me.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think that a lot of character was given to aggro. You just have to be looking for it. And I knew from the beginning he was a bait character. He was an emotional bait character, and I knew that he was going to die, and I knew I was getting manipulated, and you'd think that would make me kind of bitter. Sometimes that sort of thing does, but I kind of actively chose not to be bitter over it. And actually, I found myself enjoying him a lot more. Sorry, maybe that didn't make any sense the way I said it.
No, that makes sense.
It makes
Sometimes
sense.
it's okay to let yourself be emotionally manipulated. Sometimes it adds to the overall experience. And
You're doing better than I am, that's for sure.
No, I can actively kind of make that choice. I mean, not fully. If you really want to be like 100% purely emotionally manipulated by something, you have to not know what's going to happen. But
Yeah, I guess that's the thing, that it was so textbook fairy tale type of story that it was just not. It felt very two-dimensional, I guess. Like, it was so easy to see like what was happening and what was coming. I mean, there is surprises. Like, you don't know exactly what's going to happen, but like I didn't feel like the main character showed a lot of complexity or.
Wander, you mean?
Yeah, everything seemed very like two-dimensional, which I mean I do love the like all these things, the scale, the Colossuses themselves, the puzzle elements of it, but in terms of the story and the characterization, it just feels very shallow to me.
I don't know. I mean, like, I think there's a lot of constraints that people put on NPCs to try to find ways to make them work, because it's such a difficult thing to get to work in a game. Like, Yorda and Eco like doesn't speak the same language as your character, so they can't have long conversations. So all their communication is like physical, and like that was an interesting constraint. Agro's a horse, so like there's a lot of inherent constraints that come with that as far as developing the character and the relationship. I actually thought it worked a bit better than Yorda, and there's trends like a lot of modern storytelling trends in games of like all the characters are gone and you just find out stuff about them. Like, you don't interact with them, but you just find all their documents that they left over and like learn about their lives. Like all these things to just get away from the like an embodied character standing in front of you that like has to talk and act like a real person, which still is a really hard thing to like make convincing. And this still is an example for me that like I come back to, that I think the constraints that they chose, I feel like were really intelligently chosen and selected, compared to like I don't know. I don't really like the like everybody's gone thing. I've played a few games like that I enjoyed, but it just like doesn't feel like there's that many directions you can take that.
I think everyone is gone in this game.
What's that?
Everyone is gone. I mean, the only one who talks to you is that voice from the sky, and then, I mean, the horse.
Right.
I'm assuming they have a strong bond because it does whatever you want it to. But
yeah, everyone's gone, but they're not using that as like in the way that I'm describing of a like they're not gone and they left behind all their books and papers and
well,
stuff.
I mean,
where you
at least if you had that, you'd like know who this girl is or why they were sacrificing her or what they're like. It's just.
But does that really have an impact on the game, though?
It does, because I don't want to do this stuff. Like, it doesn't make sense. There's no, like...
Isn't that the point of the game, though?
I guess the thing that I don't like as much about the sort of excavation style, like, ways of telling a story is, like, it doesn't feel like it leverages anything about, like, games, like, and to tell the story in, like, a better way than if I could just read these things on my own. Like, because you don't interact with the character, there's not really an interactive component to it besides like going and picking up the pre-written things and reading them. So it is a good way to like learn about the character. But I liked in this that I was interacting with the character, and my relationship to it developed over the course of playing the game and through just like little physical interactions, and the fact that we're in this environment that increases my feeling of loneliness and my desire to like bond with the horse and
anything.
Yeah. And all those things, I just felt like they came about very naturally through these design decisions. But there was like more of an interactive component at like the core of them somehow.
It's also, if you have like notes and whatnot, it also in a way ruins the pacing of the story, because depending on what kind of player you are, you're either going to try to find all of them and thus prolong your gameplay to an extremely long amount, or you're going to skip all of them and get a completely unsatisfying plot. So I think the fact that they just kind of stuck with this minimalistic story and say we're not going to add much more details besides these crucial parts was a brave and a smart decision. That said, I do also agree with Alana in the sense that it was very, very bare bones, and to me, like, it didn't add much. The story didn't really add too much to the experience, with a couple of lore implications aside. Like, I kind of wanted to see, maybe for me, I wanted to see a little more hints of it, and nothing much more than that. But like, I kind of would have liked a little more hints behind the history of the location. But all they say is it's a forbidden location, and you get an implication that there was a history there, but you don't know what the history is at all. And there's like plenty of opportunity in that game. You can easily tell they like all the skippable cutscenes are pretty much the same as the previous one, to a point where it gets nauseating seeing that same thing over, seeing the same idol, just collapsing, and then the voice saying, "Go look for this." Like, it gets nauseating at a certain point. Like, they had plenty of opportunity, I think, to put a few more hints here and there. Like, even in the text of the voice was fascinating to me. The fact that it would say, like, there was a lost city that nobody goes to. Like, even just that extra detail I would have found to be a little more engaging.
I don't look at games in terms of... I mean, I think every work of art, or whether it's a story, movie, is a product of its limitations. So you have the technological limitations we talked about of like draw distances and other things.
Yeah, it's a technical train wreck.
How much stuff you can have on the screen at once in terms of scenery or other characters. But I think it's also a product of like time, money. Like I almost imagine this game as almost like it started as a tech demo. We're going to make a huge character and you fight it, and then they've kind of built this framework around it of, okay, we'll add this typical damsel in distress type storyline. We'll just kind of throw that on there, and this very basic mythology.
But it's not typical, and then it gets turned on its head. The brave hero is actually being a complete jerk. The monsters are innocent.
I think that's what most of the stories are, actually. It's the hero is being a single-minded lunatic. But I don't know. I mean, it does to me feel like the parts I like about it are the parts where I think they focused most of their time and energy, which is on the puzzle element of climbing the Colossuses and the action elements of swinging around and stabbing it and all that. And I feel like everything else is just kind of thrown in there as we're going to make a kind of similar to our previous game, but different type of storyline where you're talking about the companion. So they have those same type of elements, but I just don't feel like they fleshed it out. Like, that was not the point. Like, the game was built from the Colossuses down, not like from the two characters, the horse and the girl, and built the game around that. It's like that was probably the last thing.
I don't think so. I mean, I think there are some things that feel more tacked on, like parts of the story that we talked about that feel like they could have easily come at the end. I don't think that Agro specifically was a case like that, based on a few things. One is, like, again, the entire design of the environment is based on traversing it more quickly, presumably on horseback or some other method. Like, they didn't design that whole world and then come up with the horse later. Also, just the fact that, again, it is like this game came after Eco, and that was like a central component of Eco. Like Eco's design from the start was your relationship with this like AI controlled NPC that would like you would have more of a relationship with in like a less typical way than other games. So I think they definitely had the idea of carrying that over with this being like a spiritual successor. And I think they probably hit on the horse like a little bit earlier than being the last thing that they added in. For those reasons and others, like, and obviously just the amount of attention that they put into the horse, like we mentioned, like the AI of the horse, all the like incidental interactions you can have with it, like the fact that some of the Colossus battles require the horse in terms of like the puzzle of it, like I feel like
those are the elements where I felt like it made sense, like because to me the game was about killing the Colossuses, and like all the battles where the horse has nothing to do with it felt like again it was a secondary thing. Like there's so many battles where the horse can't even be anywhere near there because it's like gated off, so it just felt like I'm leaving the horse behind again, just forget about it, and it'll be there when I respawn after killing it. If the horse had been part of more of those battles, maybe I would have felt like I mean, I know like there's a part where you're riding the horse and it's like automatic, like you're mentioning shooting the arrows or something. I just never felt like, again, it's like the horse is on a rail type thing almost. Like, I think if the horse played a more active role in the battling, maybe. Like I was using it as bait sometimes, but it just never really felt like it was a necessary part of it. For the most part. What were the other parts where you felt like it was like important to the killing or the Colossus parts?
Finding all the shrines, finding all the newts, finding all the fruits.
I don't know, one thing I thought was kind of weird, I don't know, because I only went 6 in, did the design of the Colossus change much from being stone and hair? Because it seemed kind of weird that they all had a very similar like design. Somehow I was imagining like each one would be like slightly different, like oh, maybe they'll change the moss or something else, but it seemed like they're all just stone and hair.
Some of them look a little more industrial than the others, but
yeah, like the last one in particular, it's a bit different.
Very industrial. There's a couple that clearly based off of their environment, they're more charred or they're more sandy.
Yeah.
And then I think there were a few that were pretty mossy, but other than that.
Okay. I'm not sure if that might have been like a technical limitation of the PS2 or something.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was true, to be honest.
Well,
because it is a train wreck in the PS2.
I mean,
the PS2 version stuff pretty
train
smooth.
wreck.
No, it's a technical train wreck. The
It's
frame
not
rate
technical.
drops everywhere.
This
The
game
R1
is
button
not-
doesn't work.
No.
Well, is it as bad as Odin Spear and the one spider battle?
you probably just had a bad controller.
Well,
There's-
Cat played
there's
it. Did
no-
you have that problem?
I did.
No,
actually.
this game doesn't. Its frame rate doesn't drop as
Doesn't
bad
drop.
as Odin Sphere.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I heard about Odin Spear, but that game will drop down to like 5.
Yeah.
So when you're saying it drops, is it like...
I think it's good that the
No, it's at a consistent 15 frames per second. So every once in a while, when it jumps to 60, you're like, "What happened
You feel
here?
like the game went fast forward.
What's going on here?" And then it switches back to 15 frames per second. You're like,
Oh, that's not...
"Why couldn't the rest of the game be like
What
this?"
game?
that was a cutscene.
Shadow of the Colossus.
On the PS2.
It actually jumps to like 30 frames or even 60 frames per second at a couple of places, and I'm like,
It's probably a cutscene.
but I want the game to be more like this.
Oh, so
There's
the PS3
a
version.
lot of visual effects, like collision deformation. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
I know it affects gameplay at times, but it's
I think-
pretty impressive that the game ever runs at more than like 5 frames per second with all the stuff that
It's
they're doing.
not a train wreck.
Yeah.
It's Shadow of the Colossus.
I think the artistic design was good, that it was similar between all the Colossuses, but that they
Yeah.
were still sort of like some different creatures. That
Yeah.
they looked like different animals, but they still had a similar artistic style. So
Well, yeah, I mean, well, what else would they be made of? Not stone and dirt and metal. There's not much else to the land besides that.
They simultaneously don't look like creatures from any other game or piece of media, like exactly, but like, yeah, there's like an internal kind of logic to them, and they feel like part of the world in a way that it feels like even more of a violation, like against like the whole environment that you're in, that you're like fighting them and killing them. Like it feels like they have more of a right to belong there than you do, you know.
They do. I mean, they have, and again, that's why I say, like, to me, this game is built around them. All the design elements and stuff kind of focus on them. Like, your character is pretty bland. The girl is extremely bland sitting there on that thing. The horse is kind of
looking like a paper doll.
The horse to me doesn't look like it's interesting at all. It almost looks, it's just a wide motorcycle. I don't know.
It's just a horse.
It doesn't look like they put a lot of, I mean, I'm sure they had some good artists working on it, but like, it's just very planned. Like, there's nothing to draw your attention to the horse at all. Is there even a saddle on it? Or?
Yeah, saddle on it. There's a cool article about how they did the inverse kinematics for the hooves and stuff.
Inverse kinematics.
Yeah.
Inverse kinematics is a technology used in animation to place a hand at an approximate location and make it look natural.
They spent a lot of time on that horse.
Yes, they did.
They spent a lot of time on that character too, although that one for a more obvious reason. But yeah, I did notice that they spent a lot of time on that horse.
Whether it was time well spent is another story. For people. I agree also that, like, I mean, you could potentially have a game that would be still good with just the Colossi, and probably with just the horse you wouldn't have as much.
Yeah, the horse is fine.
Has anyone else done the research on the early design of this game? Because I was under the impression that it was supposed to be based off of Gulliver Travels, where you're supposed to control a bunch of troops to pull down a giant.
Yeah, the original design. So Ueda, his background is as an artist and an animator. So, so what he did for Eco and for this was he did like basically a movie. That was like the design document of, like, he did a little short movie showing like this is what he envisions the gameplay to be, and that was sort of like the core of the design. So the movie for Shadow of the Colossus was a bunch of little characters running up on a Colossus and attacking it. So it was envisioned as like a multiplayer game at the very beginning, and it did start with the Colossus. So you're right in that regard. But yeah, I don't know if it was like supposed to be online multiplayer or what, but there's like a bunch of little people scampering up a Colossus and you like take it down together. But obviously they diverged from that pretty quickly. The HD version has a lot of good like extra stuff. They include the movie and interviews and stuff like that.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah, it's definitely worth picking up.
I'm curious, Robert, you said mixed feelings at one point. Was there any particular negative that stood out for you?
Probably the tedium and the difficulty.
Fair enough.
I found a lot of the... See, I caught myself there. More times than not, while playing this game, I tended to call the Colossi golems instead, because that's really what they were. They were animated mud come to life. So I was just about to call them a golem, but
you know what? That's what I'm going to call them in the near future.
But I mean, there's a lot of Colossi that I had a problem figuring out what I was supposed to do. Yeah. Even with the hints, sometimes didn't make sense to me. So that combined with the constant shaking and the falling, I found a lot of them pretty difficult to the point where it was like, why am I even bothering? And then when you're not fighting the Colossi, you're just wandering around, and there's just this big openness with like nothing to do but hunt newts and get fruits, and I was like
newts and fruits, baby.
And so that added to the tedium of it. It just seemed like all you're doing was going from one boss battle to the next without any real story in between. And that kind of was my mixed feelings.
16 is a lot of boss battles to go through, and there's nothing in between.
Exactly.
I'm actually torn.
There's epic scenery to travel in between.
Yeah, I mean, the story is what you make of it. The whole thing is left ambiguous, so you can come up with your own story. That's something that the creators are very firm about. And the director even says, like, oh, I think of this as for a long time, he said, oh, I mean, I can kind of consider this is related to Ico or Eco, but he didn't say outright for ages. And it was many years before he was like, I imagine this as a prequel to Ico. And he's like, but he's always been very insistent on people coming up with their own ideas about things, which is something I've noticed similar to Journey. You come to your own conclusions. I like inventing my own story.
Yeah,
me too.
You definitely don't want to, like, if you make a story, like, I just released this movie, you have to explain to people what it's about. Like, I don't think any creator wants to say, well, this actually means, well, like, you always want your story to speak for itself. But if you make it, I mean, it's one thing to say, I want people to discover for themselves it's related to Eco. But if that's what he knew all along, then, like, I definitely saw the connections there, but you don't ever want to have to say, like, this is a prequel.
Well, he never did. People were asking him, and they saw the connections, and they bothered him about it, and he refused to say for a long time because he is so adamant about people thinking for themselves and drawing up their own backstories.
I think
the
that's
death
different
of the
than-
artist or writer or author. I can't get their name right. Never mind.
It's sort of like when I know a lot of people were hyped about Lost, this TV show with all these unanswered questions, and I never got into it because...
Then they answered him and it was boring.
Yeah, I know, right? Exactly. Sometimes it's better if you don't know.
I don't think they answered him. I think that was...
No, they didn't. They answered a lot of them. But...
people wanted to know the answers because they kept leaving all these hints that went nowhere, and it was like just throwing stuff out there ambiguously, and people, what does it mean? Oh.
That's the case of ambiguity done badly, I think, in the storytelling scenario.
Not all ambiguity is created equal. I mean, and I think it's pretty subjective too. Like, it's not going to lead to a fun conversation about it necessarily, but like, you know, what is just the right amount of detail for one person to fill in like a backstory might be for somebody else feeling like there's absolutely nothing to go on at all. So, like, for me, this worked really well, and it gave me enough. And, you know, there were some areas that I thought could have been more developed in an interesting way, like Mono, but like also, I don't think when I first played it, like I felt like a huge, like there was this dearth of detail there where like I couldn't fill something in that worked for me.
Again, I really view it as like this is one of my favorite games as well from that era, but it's almost all because of the graphics and gameplay. Like many of us said at the beginning, like the story is just, it's not really the purpose of the game. It's not an RPG per se, and it does. And again, I do feel it's kind of a two-dimensional story. It doesn't give you a lot of options. So, but I mean, I think they tried. I mean, they tried to add story elements. They tried to make you feel emotional about the characters. I just felt like since so much of the focus was on the puzzling and action elements of the game, those other elements that they tried to add in to make it a more complete experience just, to me, didn't feel like... and again, I don't fault them for that. I think, you know, given what they were trying to do, I feel like they put a lot of their emphasis on like pushing the technological limitations of that game in terms of, you know, the Colossuses and the environments. I mean, this is PS2 era. I mean, this is like, well, there's a lot of still pretty ugly games out there, pretty limited games. So, yeah, I think to me that's what this game is really strong for. I don't necessarily hold it against them that they didn't choose to develop those characters. I mean, you could make an argument for ambiguity, but to me, it's more like I don't think it's just that. That's not where the focus of the game was on the story elements. It's kind of like in Braid. Like Braid has a story. I know I'm bringing this up again because it's another damsel chasing type of thing. And to me, that was always like the point of that game. To me, was like the time warping, puzzling aspects of it, like the whole story thing. It did make sense at the end, and it was interesting, like an interesting twist. But I kind of just ran through I read it, but I was like, to me, it was just kind of so much window dressing because it was presented to you as, again, it's just like books. You're reading these books as you go through. You're not talking to anybody, so it does feel kind of ambiguous. Like making these portraits. So like, I don't know. Did anyone else play Braid?
Yeah,
I did.
Yeah, it was about the atomic bomb, right?
So
Jonathan Blow's going to materialize and tell us we're all wrong now.
So
As
before
we try
we
to say
go
what it's
there,
Into Braid?
I'm just kind of thinking through my thoughts. I played exactly the same way with Braid as well, and yet I kind of liked its ending presentation a little more, although for a fundamentally different reason that I frankly don't think Shadow of the Colossus could have done. I don't. In a way, I feel like the comparison between the two when it comes to sort of story presentation is a little unfair, because there wasn't much Shadow of Colossus could have done, I feel like, to make the story more engaging than it already.
I think adding too much story could be a double-edged sword. What if you hated the character? Why would you want to then save the character?
Well, I guess.
Thank you.
Okay, so for people, the reason why I'm saying this, I'm phrasing it really poorly right now, is because Braid has this awesome end twist, but it was presented in a specific way that I just cannot see Shadow of the Colossus doing the same thing for.
Well, Shadow has an end twist as well, to some extent. It's just...
Well, but it felt more, as we discussed earlier, it felt more like a logical conclusion than a twist.
I mean, I didn't really expect him to turn into a demon or to get killed and all that stuff that happened. I mean, it was still... I knew that it was going to affect him negatively. I didn't know that all that was going to happen specifically. And you mentioned you didn't even know whether or not doing all this was actually going to bring her back from the dead. Like, there were still unknowns in terms of
hope that good stuff happens.
Yeah. I don't think it was a necessarily negative ending. I think this Shadow of the Colossus ended on at least a neutral ending, maybe happy.
Happy. The horse lived for no reason.
I mean, I don't look at it as super negative. I mean, the negative climax was when he kind of transforms and gets killed. But then it resolves that, so it's not like that's the ending and it just cuts to black or something.
Well, I mean, I'm considering it a tragedy because it is a hero story. You are playing it from the hero's perspective.
I just feel like...
I should have clarified, it's not really a hero story. It's a wander story. It's more accurate.
With Braid, like how much... I mean, every game is, again, the subject of its limitations. You have, like, however many, maybe one guy making Braid by himself. And then you've got a team at Sony making this game, which obviously there's a lot of work put into it. But I don't buy that you can't add more story because you just make the characters bad or something. That's just giving them character. You may not like it, but at least giving them a character.
I don't think that was their line of thinking, though.
Yeah.
I think it was a very deliberate decision, and to be fair, it might just be one of those stylistic things that, we each have different tastes for. But I think it was a very deliberate stylistic decision to keep the story to a minimum, because the storylines during that age of gaming era, especially if you're looking at JRPGs, were pretty sophisticated by that point. So it doesn't seem to me like it was a product of its time. It seems more to me like a very deliberate stylistic decision of, no, we're going to stick with this specific level of detail and no more.
The story is the things you are doing.
Right.
The things you are doing are awesome. And
Yeah.
That is true.
a store,
But there's a narrator in the beginning.
yeah.
It's a
but
memory. It's one of Wander's memories.
some people were sad in the past. It's pretty boring compared to
Well, not always.
climbing a Colossus.
Did anyone think that the game was significantly less a power fantasy than, say, God of War, that also has epic large bosses?
I didn't play God of War because I thought it stuck.
I'm thinking about Legend of Zelda: The Twilight Princess, which is infamously known to copy a thing or two from Shadow of Colossus. But
It's
The,
very much. I saw it and I said, I want to play that because I want to climb a monster and defeat it.
Yeah.
It very rarely felt like a power fantasy to me, and that I usually felt like a little flea
Yeah.
struggling, a little lonely flea. Just not a power fantasy I have. But there were moments when I do like an awesome jump off my horse, land on like the fin of the phalanx and climb it, where I was like, yeah, I'm super cool.
The power is in defeating the Colossus, not looking cool doing it.
Yeah.
well, when I say a power fantasy, I mean like the feeling of being able to take on anything.
Oh no.
And Shadow of the Colossus, I felt like distinctly was designed not to make you feel that way. It was making you feel you dreading to see what the next Colossus is, and when you see it, you're like, I am
Excited,
not
but-
beating that.
Yeah, no.
And I didn't feel that way, but then again, I was looking at it as, hey, there's an AI I can try to exploit me. But I did, especially watching Kat play, I certainly did not feel like the way she was playing it would be the same way I personally would play a Zelda game, in the sense that if I look at a boss, I'm like, that looks like awesome, I'm going to kill you kind of thing. Whereas her reaction to a Colossus was more like, oh, please, no.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that. Almost every time I saw a Colossus, it would always be like, oh boy, I gotta kill that. They always kind of impressed me somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Either like in the uniqueness of their design, or just like in how well built they were and how formidable they'd be as an enemy.
Am I incorrect? Well, I'm just curious. Have you played any Zelda games before? I assume you have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Wind Waker was my first Zelda game, actually.
How was your reaction to the bosses in that game, and how, especially compared to Shadow of the Colossus? How did that differ? Is my curiosity here.
With those bosses, once you know how to beat them, it's relatively easy. At least with the badly designed ones.
Yeah, Shadow of the Colossus,
Once you know the way, you feel safe. In Shadow of the Colossus, there's a lot more room for error, for slipping and stumbling, for missing your time, your cue, or whatever. You don't always feel reassured in your ability to destroy them.
Is there any point where something can one-shot kill you? Because I felt like I was pretty powerful compared to...
In hard mode, yes.
What's hard mode? Is that after you win? Because for the most part, I was like...
Also, I clip through the ground a lot, so yes, a couple of these bosses do have one-shot kills.
Well, it depends on how many fruits and newts you got.
I had to skip those.
What's the power fantasy?
A power fantasy is feeling invincible.
What would you say, Jamie?
Me? Just a sense of being powerful, I guess. I guess the power fantasy would be like being, some experience that makes you feel powerful in a way that you can't in like your everyday life, maybe. So I have the power to right all the wrongs in this world. I have the power to, whatever.
You can mow down whoever. I can change the
Right.
landscape.
Could be just like power fantasy in terms of being able to beat up like these monsters in this world and not be afraid of them. There's lots of different individual power fantasies. But.
Believe it or not, I take a lot of Zelda games to be a power fantasy, largely because the game constantly encourages you to go farther, and there's no hints. It's very rare that a Zelda game would make you feel a sort of dread or sort of like a lack of, a sort of hopelessness to it. It's always hopeful. It always makes you feel like you can always beat something, and in some ways that in and of itself makes a very comfortable franchise. Going back to Shadow of the Colossus, I didn't necessarily feel like that was the intended presentation for that game.
I don't think so at all.
Oh, absolutely not.
And that to me is, especially for its time, was, I think, a brave decision. And I still think today it stands out coming from that perspective as well.
Yeah.
Because sorry, go on.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of points of reference for a lot of things in this game for me were, like, Zelda was my main point of comparison. So even just the fact that, like, you're not getting a bunch of upgraded equipment and, like, items over the course of this game, and when I realized that, I'm like, okay, like, everything is just... So this is like a puzzle game, basically, because I just have this small set of, like, abilities, and it's all just about the context of how I use them. Like, you're not getting your power armor as you go along. Or, I didn't really know about the newts and fruits, so I wasn't, like, grinding when I played it, to the extent that you can grind, like...
I knew about the newts, by the way. I never knew about the fruits. That one I just happened to come upon by accident. I'm like, I probably can shoot that down, and it's like, oh, my health bar increased.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
And I got really greedy after that.
But yeah, the game doesn't explain either one of those. Like, it's just you kind of figure out about the lizards and the fruits on your own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, but then I guess the game is weird like that they actually give you like a very almost like a strict tutorial at the very beginning, and they're just like, all right, go out, have fun, and you have to figure out the Colossus the hard way. Like the fourth one, it's like, eventually some Colossus I'll have to just literally do nothing to move forward. Like that's they don't really give you any real hints for that.
Yeah, I mean, each Colossus felt to me like I was starting back at square one, basically. Like, I never felt like, oh, now that I'm up to the fourth one, I'm like much better at this than I was before, because each one is like its own unique puzzle. So there's like, mentally I felt daunted in terms of like I have to figure it out well, kind of evading this thing. And then even when I figure it out, it's like executing it is a challenge too. So I felt powerful. I felt like cool at times. I felt like I just did an awesome thing. But I didn't often feel like super powerful, I guess. But I don't know. I can't like necessarily elaborate on the distinction.
Well, it's definitely not like God of War where you got
where you're
double
just
handling swords and jumping up
and massacring like thousands of things.
I bring up No More Heroes a lot. No More Heroes is the definition of a power fantasy, and you can tell from the fundamental design of the way they did, like how you mow down all the little goons. Like that definitely feels like a power fantasy. And it's like the one thing that to me is those two games are drastically different, because No More Heroes is it's so driven on like the idea of you're supposed to be this all powerful guy who is also a complete jerk, and probably everything that is happening is probably all in his head, and the reality is much more gruesome. It's kind of like that game's line of thinking. Versus in Shadow of the Colossus, it just felt more like, as you said, everything felt like a square one perspective. You have a new puzzle to solve. You don't know what to do. You're given with so little information, and you just have to constantly improvise until you figure it out. And even then, execution then becomes another question. It's like, how do I get the execution to be the most optimal in its current situation? So like, I don't know. To me, that was like a pretty big breath of fresh air, I would say. I want to bring up Dark Souls, but that's like a really bad example because Dark Souls in a way also does an excellent job of making you feel like you're starting off at square one every time you're encountering a new boss anyways.
I think that's the same realm of that. Well, so what would be the opposite of a power fantasy? Everyday life game.
Worse than everyday life. Just
Well, I mean,
everything beats you down.
Well, that's the thing. There's plenty of different options. There's horror. There's, this fairy tale game. There's, noir. I'm thinking of Killer 7 in that case, and that kind of stuff. So, I mean, there's a lot of different branching paths. There's narrative, a journey.
Mm-hmm.
So
I guess Shadow Colossus would just be more of like the struggle.
right.
Yeah.
So
I don't know necessarily like in terms of a game. Like I think there's lots of game examples probably. Like lots of horror games, for example, that do it well, do it by making you feel like
Helpless.
Resident Evil. I have 2 dogs and 1 bullet.
But I think like in terms of real life, I mean the people criticize like power fantasy in general a lot, and I think there are points of reference I think of from my own life where I feel like I'm really glad that I had access to like a game that provided a power fantasy. And most of those relate to like childhood, for example, would be like a time where I think of as the opposite of like your life is very much you're kind of out of your control. Not that it's not other times, but it's pronounced as a child. And also just like, I mean, I've like experiences of people I've known who have had like illnesses and stuff. Like I can remember playing games with family members like in the hospital and just playing like Mario, as something that like there's like I think of Mario as a power fantasy on some level, but like it's great to have that sometimes when you like don't have power over other stuff in your life. So I don't know, like I don't think there's one opposite of power fantasy, but I think power fantasy can be quite valuable. It's just people don't like it when it's the only thing available, which is a totally reasonable criticism.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's exactly what I was going to say. The only reason why I think power fantasies is negative is largely because it's so common. I mean, the same thing would happen if every game was a horror. So, and it's already happening, by the way. So, I think that's a bad criticism.
I think it's only a negative power fantasy in the fact that you're gaining power by doing negative things. Like I think there can be more positive power fantasy games out there where you feel like you're doing something good or righteous, and this game never made me feel like I was being very righteous. So it was a negative power fantasy, not negative in the sense of bad, just in the sense of not doing
narrative direction.
Yeah.
Narrative and experiential direction.
Yeah, I mean, there's a game where you're using power to do lots of games. You're using powerful actions that you're provided to do terrible things, and the game is giving positive reinforcement to that.
Right.
Those tend to be off-putting.
Yeah, that always is.
But this game at least is, while you might feel awesome moment to moment, like it's at least trying to encourage you to reflect on the ramifications of it, which is, I mean, that alone was, I'm sure there were other games that had done it prior to Shadow of the Colossus. Like if I thought about it, I'm sure I could cite examples, but it was a prominent game that did it at a time when it was maybe a little less common than it is now. So I think that's why some people remember it as like having a really great story or something, or having like an artistic point behind it, like, and they think of the story as being a little bit stronger than, for me at least, it actually is when you go back and play it. Like the actual linear narrative of it is, I mean, I think I agree with your assessment for the most part, Alana. It's just, it doesn't feel like the focal point.
It definitely isn't. You fight monsters, and then you need to put some space between it, and you need a situation for why you're fighting monsters.
Yeah.
It checks off all the boxes.
Yeah, but
it just makes. I mean,
It doesn't make it any less awesome.
it makes the whole thing makes me feel like it's not necessarily. It's not a joyful thing. I mean, the fact that you see this thing collapse with sad music, and then you get hit by the black tentacles and you collapse. It's just like this very somber type of thing. So, I mean, like I said, there's the graphical mood. All those things make it feel like a bad task that you're taking. I just wish that, the motivation of factors for doing it felt like it was somewhat justified in some way. And to me, I just never connect that line to make it really feel like this is something I need to do.
I'd argue that's part of the beauty of it. It's not justified if you're doing something wrong.
Well,
or it could be justified, maybe.
They just leave it too up in the air.
Yeah, which I used to hate that kind of thing. But I really am coming to appreciate not knowing, actually. It takes a lot of courage to not tell people things and not try to exert control over your own story. But
I mean, if kind of the point that they were trying to make, and I'm not saying it is, but if you take it as they're trying to criticize this sort of trope and this sort of story, then
trope.
In a way, I think providing more detail, like it puts the emphasis back on, like we'd probably be discussing more now, like whether or not the reasoning was justified.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like if it's just there's not a lot of detail to it, and then you do it, and like the outcome is what it is. Like I feel like it shifts the emphasis a little more in a way that I think it's. You could argue like it kind of makes sense to leave it more ambiguous because it just puts the focus on this character running through the typical like motions that a fairy tale hero would go through or whatever. Like
I really didn't get the impression from this game that it was attempting to deconstruct. I think it was just mimicking the typical what do you call it, fairy tale storyline.
Yeah, how is it deconstructing it?
A deconstruction is going through exactly the same motions, but pointing out the flaws of said motions.
How did this do that?
deconstruction is strong. I think I wouldn't argue necessarily that it's deconstructing it.
I don't think it is,
but
because fairy tales are tragic.
well, they can be bleak, but more often than not, the heroes win.
Maybe in
They
a
get
Disney,
their prize.
in the Disney version.
maybe
Yes, he did get his prize,
If
right?
they were making
So-
it more
Right.
No, he got
obvious
turned
that
into a
it was-
baby. and
Right,
then-
No, he did.
She got brought back to life. That was what he was trying to do at at whatever it costs.
So
Yeah.
I think
that
maybe
was-
the
that
term
was it.
fairy
That
tale
doesn't
is.
mean he didn't suffer, though.
I think maybe the term fairy tale is a distraction in this regard. But I just mean like Alana, you gave a better description of it before. I think of what I'm trying to describe, which is just like the trope of the protagonist of a story who like the ends justify the means for, and they're going to do whatever they need to do in order to accomplish this goal. And the goal is a very stereotypical like damsel scenario, right? And so like to just keep that very kind of like a bit bland and a bit vague and like it makes it more generalized, I guess, in a way where then when they're sort of subverting that and calling attention to the fact that like making it feel very somber and making you not feel that good when you're going through these actions, it's encouraging you to not feel good about doing that. So it's not like providing enough, like it's not analyzing it to the level of deconstructing it, but I think it is trying to subvert it a little bit, just in not trying to make you feel good about doing it, and keeping it vague enough that you could then apply this to any number of other stories that have a similar structure, even if the details vary. Whereas, like, if it was a much more specific thing about exactly like what Wander's relationship is with Mono and
Or even
Wander's reasoning, like it would be a much more specific thing where we'd be focused on the specifics of that narrative, like background.
Even what things we were talking about earlier, like the fact we were talking about some of the Colossuses being completely passive, or if you had more of a knowledge of them, if you saw them existing in their nature as instead of being this aggressive force, maybe trying to kill you, but it's just something, because they, at the end of the day, they are huge and they're kind of threatening. So it's not like they're totally benign and lovable creatures.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, they're not designed in a very cutesy type way. So I think they could have.
I just had a
at
different relationship with them. Like over the course, like there are ones that are more aggressive, but
Yeah.
I felt like I was the intruder pretty much always. Like I went out of my way to follow this light to go with the intention of killing them. So even if they responded aggressively when I got there, like I already felt like I was the.
I think if they really wanted to deconstruct the narrative, though, they would have made them much less threatening, much more seen as they could have pushed that farther. I'm saying if they were really trying to deconstruct the narrative and show that these things are actually good and what you're doing is bad. But
it's too blunt though.
Well,
it's too straightforward. Not knowing actually makes it all that much better.
It's not that it's not knowing. It's just that they don't show you the Colossus is doing anything like else. They don't make them more deep.
Yeah.
It's a very limited interaction you have with them.
It's just like some of them are quite docile, and so that was the impression I had from them. And also just they're all super majestic. It feels like a shame to be, not that it's great to kill a thing that's not majestic, but I don't know. I don't know. I just had a different feeling about it, I guess.
They need to heal it up and insult your hometown.
Yeah, they could have taken it in different directions that would have made it more an obvious attack on traditional storytelling techniques, but they left it, like you said, ambiguous, which just kind of makes you kind of say, okay, this isn't really a thing to worry about, and you just kind of mostly ignore it.
Do you don't think the game was encouraging you to feel bad about killing them?
It was subtly. I mean, I saw points where it was, again, it's kind of like felt was a little bit hand-fisted. All these things that they were doing, they didn't really seem like it was trying to make you feel this way rather than...
Wait, so was it too subtle or no?
It was too... Like I said, it's too obviously scripted, what they're trying to make you feel without actually doing the things to make you feel it. You just meet these things, they're instantly trying to kill you, and then you're supposed to feel bad for it. They don't give you any chance to really, get to know them in any sense to actually feel bad. It's like when they kill off a character that you just meet, and you're supposed to oh no.
Right. So you don't think they earned even if they were going for that, they didn't really earn it for you?
And I think if they were, for instance, the most obvious way you could do that is just have them be actual creatures, like animals, and they're defenseless and you're slaughtering them. That would be the most, obvious use of...
Wouldn't have worked for Taro. Taro killed that dove and didn't think twice.
Well,
it's actually kind of interesting that my reaction to... I listed three Colossi, three golems earlier. That I felt bad killing for, but every single one of them was post-death, and I just kind of looked at it I just kind of thought about what I did for a while, and I said, that golem never attacked me. It's oh. Mm-hmm. So I'm the bad guy in this scenario, and to me, in a way, I actually kind of like that presentation.
They could have done
it's
more.
something right. It's something where you kind of look back to it and you're like, oh wait a minute, that boss didn't do anything. Kind of what is the TV trope term? Fridge brilliance / fridge horror, where you're just going up to your fridge and you suddenly come to realize the brilliance of that scene. That's kind of to me, those moments are actually really strong. Where anything where you just kind of think post, you don't think about it too much, and then you just kind of think about it later, and you come to realize how brilliant that moment actually was, and how that all ties into the rest of the game. Personally, I like those moments in storylines, video games, art, etc. And I feel like those three bosses were kind of the perfect characterization of that, in the sense that you're in the moment and you're I don't care, I just have to kill these guys, and then you think about it and you're but they never attacked me.
And contrast that with the last boss who's shooting fireballs and chucking them across the room.
No, contrast that with every single boss I had to fight where I just whistled at it and it immediately tries to kill me. It's I whistled at you.
I'm saying if they did more of that, where they're not trying to kill you, they're just trying to get you away from them. When you see, when they're trying to shake you off, that feels again, you're the aggressor, and they're just trying to get you to stop hitting them.
I think of them a lot more like wild animals than thinking feeling beings. If you
Other
go out and you run
animals
into a
aren't
bear, and you run across its cubs, it's not going to just try and shoo you away. It's going to kill you.
Yeah, that's true.
So
Well, if a bear sees a squirrel, is it going to be like, ah?
if it's
Yeah,
hungry,
too.
if it's hungry, it will.
It might be indifferent, mostly. I mean, squirrels aren't.
I mean,
that
you
much
wouldn't
meat.
think the Colossus would see you as a threat necessarily, because you're like,
Until you whistle them, apparently.
Well, you're making noise and you're trying to get their attention. If like
So they're hungry?
Maybe they're rabbit animals.
okay, it was yeah. Well, a rabbit animal will have my attention. I'd want to like curb stomp it so I don't get bit.
They have sensitive ears.
Maybe you smell real bad too, huh?
Yeah.
I confess that this is way too late to bring this up. I'm going to bring it up anyway. The one sand monster that you're supposed to shoot its eye at and make it crash into the wall, that took forever for me to figure out because, like, almost every other Colossi, you shoot at its eye and nothing happens.
Bingo.
So, I don't know. I felt that was weird.
Definitely. I think the game gave that one to me out of pity. I never shot his eye. Never. I tried once. I missed. I was like, okay, that's probably not it. Shooting
more
eyes.
protective being.
Alana's leaving now because she has to leave.
yes.
You have to say goodbye.
Is 3 hours too long for you for a podcast?
We started a bit late, and
We're just getting started.
we
don't know.
started a bit
This is
late.
an all-nighter.
Like when I did my Spore one, that was like less than 2 hours. So. But I mean, that didn't really have a storyline.
Neither did this, but
Do you have closing thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just say in conclusion, it's definitely one of my favorite games. I think it's incredible what they did with, the puzzle aspects and the Colossuses themselves. I do think the storyline was kind of the downside of the whole thing. I could imagine so many different ways they could have done it better, in my opinion. Whether or not you think it should be ambiguous or not, it's still... I didn't really buy the motivations or what was going on, but the actual action of trying to defeat the Colossuses and seeing them move around was the whole experience, and I think that's what initially attracted me to it, and that's what still brings me back, is being able to defeat them, even though it's difficult and can be frustrating. But maybe it could be a little less monotonous, maybe a little bit easier. But, I think for what, was obviously not unlimited amount of time and technology, they did pretty great with this game. And, I know they're working on another game with another big animal that you ride on, but I'd like
And
to...
it's much more cute and cuddlier.
If they ever come out with that, which has already missed a generation, but I'd like to see a sequel to this game where maybe they expand on it in terms of the things that they didn't show, even though, not necessarily having to fight Colossuses, just in the same world with more of the story elements and stuff that was kind of, I don't know. I'm interested. I just don't think there isn't really any answers, and that to me is like that's the missing piece for me. Like, I'd like to see more about what the Colossuses were and where they came from, how they live in the world, like not just as enemies to defeat. So anyway, great game. I give it 9.7 out of 10 IGN.
That's the end.
Extremely accurate. That's exactly what IGN did give it. Explaining the joke.
Should we also make rounds?
Yeah.
Yeah, seems like that time.
Wasn't Dylan saying something? Do you remember what you were saying?
I don't remember.
So, final thoughts.
I had something. What? I don't think that the I think very early on you realize that this isn't going to end well. As you kill each Colossus, you get a little more power, but you also have that whole paling of the skin, the darkening of the eyes, and
Limping of the idle animation.
yeah. So I think you realize that it's not going to end well for the main character, but I don't think that that's the point. The point is to finish it so he can save the girl, even if he has to end up dying. So whether or not that's other people's opinions or not.
I felt like, so I wrote this long thing,
As you always do.
as I often do. So it was a chapter for this book, and the topic was like ethical choices in games. I was really fascinated by that topic for a long time, and the different way games present like ethical choices. And I use Shadow of the Colossus as kind of like my example for the category of games where the narrative and what you're doing has an ethical component, but the ethical component is not tied to like a branching story structure or like branching, different choices that you can make. Like I can decide not to kill the Colossus and leave the Forbidden Lands and go home or whatever. So, but where like, I feel like it's a very effective example of a game where the structure, being incredibly linear, like is very well tied to what we know of the character, what little we know of Wander, which is he's this very single-minded protagonist who says at the very beginning, like, it doesn't matter the cost, like, I'm going to do this. And then you either don't play the game or you go do it. Like, so, there's lots of other games, and we it's to the point where we make fun of it sometimes on this podcast and beyond about, like, the only way to win is not to play. Like, that feels like a very cliche thing at this point. But to me, it's one of my favorite examples of a game I actually liked that, that does that, like, that weds characterization with game structure in a very simple but effective way. I don't know if that was related to what you were saying. Yeah. In my mind, it was when I started.
I think that's one of the benefits of leaving everything so vague. You can say it's being a deconstructed story of, just tropes of old video games, or you can say it's a story about sacrifice, or it's just a game of going around killing things.
Yeah. There can be many different things to many different people. And in order for us, like, a story to be good and yet so flexible, I think that is truly commendable.
Is that your closing comment?
No, it's entirely.
Are we going around doing closing?
I think we should.
Yeah, most definitely.
Who's next? Alright. So overall, from I think I put about 5 hours of time into it. I'll definitely finish the game, and I don't know, for me it feels like one of those games where it's not like a evening game where you come home and play in the evening, but more like a weekend game where you're gonna commit to like 2-3 hours at a time, because it feels like it's really, the game works best if you commit to say like, alright, I'm gonna at least play like one Colossus or two each time I sit down and play, so that way you can actually explore a little bit. You just sit there, ride the horse, and go stab some Colossus. So overall, I liked it. I'm gonna finish it all the way today. I'm probably not gonna collect all the lizard tails.
I really enjoyed this game enough that maybe after the discussion I might temporarily lift my Sony embargo and go play. I would love to see this on like a big screen and surround sound and everything.
And 3D?
I don't know about 3D.
Looks really good.
Maybe 3D.
I said this game is good. I still think so, but at the same time, I think it's also a technical train wreck. Having everything spoiled, like how you defeat the Colossi as well as how the game ended, really reduced the emotional impact for me. And in a lot of ways, I side with Alana in the sense that like it was not necessarily very easy to get attached to any single character in the game. And at least for a few of them, I realized that was a deliberate decision. Mono and Wander in particular immediately comes to my mind. But at the same time, I kind of do wish that there was a little more lore to it. I kind of do think that it could have added a little more. It could have added a little more bones for me. But carrots, whatever metaphor you want to use. But overall, I did enjoy the experience. I personally did enjoy the fact that much of it was a figure it out yourself affair. And it does, and as previously mentioned earlier, it is a game that, in my opinion, does a fantastic job of being very non-complex. There's very few tools that it gives you. There's very few things that you need to learn to be able to work with a game, and yet they're able to squeeze out so many different ideas out of it that, to me, that is the most fundamental thing that I was most impressed with the game. I personally definitely found it a lot of fun in the sense of trying to figure out how the Colossus AI worked at all, and doing some positioning and data manipulation just to get the most optimal result. And there was a lot of fun in just trying to do that alone. And I'm one of those wacky people that thinks that the empty, barren world was actually really fun to travel through because there was so many fruits and newts to gather that I don't know. It became a form of Zen to me. I just go through the game, just collect newts, just collect fruits, and feel like I'm having a good time.
Your most often repeated phrase while I was watching you play was, "Ooh, a tree!"
Gotta get me more fruits and meats. I'm Anthony, and I like this game. It's one of my favorite games. I don't have many complaints. How about the music? Pretty good, huh? The composer also did music for Godzilla movies and Gundam Wing. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Your turn.
I'm Jamie. It still is, the game that I would call my favorite game of all time, and believe it myself. I guess the main thing that still holds up about it for me is the design approach in it. Like, I feel like it's one of the largest scale renditions of a design philosophy that I really identify with, which is, Ueda has called it subtractive design. But it's basically, it's been called a minimalist game, which is really funny for like Shadow of the Colossus on some level to be like minimalist, but it is. The main thing I remember reading, I read lots of reviews and things like that and people's impressions at the time it came out. And so many people said, I like it, but it'd be better if it had this or that added. And I generally don't agree with most people's sentiments. That's one of the things that I think is generally a sign of a good design for me. I try to do this on a much smaller scale. So it's impressive to me when people take this approach. So to elaborate a little on like subtractive design, I guess you get it from minimalist, but just the idea that like you keep taking things out, like just keep stripping things away. Like as you described, Taro, it's like very pared down in a sense, right? And people reacted very strongly to that when it came out, and that like people weren't used to being in an open environment like this where there weren't constantly like enemies attacking you, like in Hyrule Field or something, like popping up every 30 seconds or whatever. I'm not necessarily a fan of it either. And so this game like demonstrated, that there's a time when you don't necessarily need that. And everything that was stripped away from the game, not having like a bunch of villages to go explore and like talk to NPCs, not having a lot of like incidental fights with random enemies in the world, not collecting lots of power armor and other abilities and acquiring things, like all these things that it took out that were like considered standard, for this type of game, were all not only deliberately done, but I think they strengthened the like core of the game, not just in terms of the like story, which I do agree, like story is the one area that's maybe, I think you could argue could be slightly less minimal, but I like the presentation of it overall. But just the mood of the game that they were trying to convey, the characterization of Wander, and like your connection as the player to Wander, like the experience you're having, connecting with the experience that Wander is having. And then just like the gameplay itself, as Tara already mentioned, like they did so many things to just create new interesting context for the small amount of verbs that you have. So to me, it's just one of the best examples still that I keep going back to of how to take that approach of like just taking out all the things that you really don't need, that don't add anything. Like, you know, I talked about the linear structure a little bit earlier. Like, I don't think the game would be better by having an in-game explicit choice where Wander can like choose, you know, from like a menu thing of like abandon the mission or whatever. Right, exactly. So all those things I mentioned that it doesn't have, like, it wouldn't be better for having it. It was deliberately taken out. And everything about like the mood of the game and everything else was calibrated like to be harmonious, I guess. And so I love it for that reason. And I really hope that Ueda either finishes up The Last Guardian or makes another game at some point in the future, because, you know, Eco, like, I encourage everybody to go play Eco if you haven't already, because it definitely takes that same approach. If anything, it's even maybe more pared down than Shadow, so that's an interesting contrast. But that's what I love about both of those games. And you know, anybody who's taking, it's so hard to take that approach with a larger budget, I think, because there's so much pressure to like put in all these standard elements. So in some way I like admire it that much more, because it's a game where they were able to lavish so much more of their team's time and attention and their budget and everything else on these elements that they focused it on. Like, that's why you haven't seen another game, even with larger budgets and teams, replicate like the feeling of scale in this game, or like just the sensation that you get from like fighting the Colossi. It's because they took away all those other things. Like, they had the ability to just make these few core elements incredibly memorable.
I don't know. I think that it's definitely a game that you should at least play once, just to experience it. I did feel that it was very minimalistic, especially in the story elements and in the gameplay elements. Really, it was just going from one boss to another and climbing all over him until you could stab his weak point, with not really much to do outside of that. But it did have a lot of, I don't know, a feeling of exploration when you're on the overworld and you're just wandering around and you're seeing all these different things in the landscape. I hadn't played Eco, but I'd read that a location in Eco is in Shadow of the Colossus. And when I went to hunt it out and I found it, I was like, that is so cool. Even though I had no emotional attachment to Eco at all, the fact that I saw this one location from this one game inside this other game, I thought that was amazingly cool. So it's those little landscape details that definitely brought out some of the beauty in the game.
Well, as I said before, and I'll say it again, I wanted to play this game for years. Finally got that chance, and I'm super happy for that.
You can take it off your bucket list.
I can, actually. It's a good feeling. I honestly wonder if maybe my interest in it has just begun, because I only beat the game yesterday, but between that time and today, I have read so much speculation, and my mind has just been absolutely whirling, trying to think of what civilizations came, where did the Colossi come from, what is Dorman, is it good, is it evil? I've so many questions about the language, about their culture. Who's Lord Eamon? Is he a shaman? Is he a nobleman? Is he both? I like the ambiguity. I like not knowing, because I want to go back. I want to explore. I want to see things and feel things and try and make a judgment for myself. I want to fight all the Colossi again and try to, infer little bits of their personality, if there's even anything to find. Are they automatons? Are they living? Do they really think and feel all that much? For me, the game is fascinating in what it doesn't say, or rather, in what it doesn't say outright. I think it's wonderful, and Yeah, I also just kind of want to see if I can beat my old time with the other Colossi, because, yeah, I can do better than 16 hours total. So I am very pleased with this one. I know, I think I'm definitely going to revisit it. Yeah. Who knows, might be the start of something, might be the start of a bigger obsession.
Hey everybody, this is Dylan. I hope you enjoyed our discussion on Shadow of the Colossus. Please join us again next time where we'll be taking a look at Minecraft, a sandbox adventure game that can quite literally be whatever you make it. Minecraft made its debut on the PC in 2009 and became so popular that it spread to most other platforms. It's currently ranked as the world's top-selling PC game and the second highest-selling video game of all time. We'll be hosting a multiplayer server for the event, so if you have the PC edition and would like to join us, contact the Tech Valley Gamespace on our website or on Facebook. We look forward to seeing you there.